Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our invocation of Councilmember Rutherford. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Theodore Roosevelt once said, "There are two things that I want you to make up your minds to. First, that you are going to have a good time as long as you live, and next, that you are going to do something worthwhile, that you are going to work hard and do the things you set out to do." As we gather tonight as representatives of the people of Billings, let us recommit ourselves to the hard work we all sought, to listening to our constituents' challenges and ideas, to faithfully educating the public on the issues our community faces, and to working together in the spirit of collaboration. And let's have a good time doing it, because we do this work in a beautiful city full of opportunity and hope and optimism, where our only real limit is out of our collective imagination. And let us remain forever humble and grateful, for it is only with a healthy dose of humility and gratitude that we can truly appreciate both the work that we do and the place in which we do it. Finally, let's take a moment to open our hearts to the people throughout our region tonight that are dealing with the devastating effects of the floods. In coming days, they will need much more than our thoughts and prayers. May we all feel the calling to personally support our fellow Montanans in their time of need. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina, Tony, please read the roll, please.
Councilmember Shaw? Here. Gulick?
Here.
Neese?
Present.
Owen?
Here.
Joy?
Present.
Chariki?
I am here.
Tidswell?
Here.
Purinton? Boyette? Here. Rupsis?
Here.
Mayor Cole?
Here. We'll move on to minutes, but before we do, I don't want us to lose sight of what's happening in our state right now. Even just this afternoon, I was woefully ignorant of a lot of it. Red Lodge is now under incredible flood, unprecedented, and other parts of our state, all the entrances, exits to Yellowstone Park are now closed. Some people are under real danger, and property damage is very, very significant in Red Lodge and around our state, including our area. So the city will do everything it can to help our neighboring communities, I'm sure. So we just want to keep our neighbors in our thoughts and prayers. So with that, we will move on to our minutes, which actually are pending, so we don't have any minutes for approval. Council courtesies, I have some comments about some of our proclamations, including the events at the zoo. But I want to turn over to Councilmember Rupsis to mention our barbecue letter that went out. That was really Councilmember Rupsis's idea, and thank him for that. And you want to tell us more about where that is at, Councilmember Rupsis?
Well, thank you. So this week, we submitted a letter. Thank you to Mayor Cole and Councilmember Shaw for helping, rewrite that essentially. But we are calling on all community members to take the opportunity this summer to set up and have a neighborhood barbecue. It seems kind of trivial, but really I think building that sense of community right around those people that live closest to us makes us all a better place, makes Billings a better place, and it actually is a big part of our public safety efforts. We have to look out for each other and support each other. And, you know, crime goes where it's allowed to go. And the stronger our neighborhoods are, the stronger networks we have, the less of that we'll see. So that's just a small part of our public safety efforts, but felt that was a good thing to do to encourage all communities, all neighborhoods around Billings to take a summer evening or whatever works for you and get together and talk and just enjoy the company. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll also just mention I just came from an event sponsored by the Montana Association for the Blind, their summer orientation program. Every year they have about 24 people who are newly blinded and often older and are having to adjust to the realities of being blind, and from macular degeneration, diabetes, number of other causes. And they're hosted here in Billings. This is the second year for that group, and welcome to Billings, Montana Association for the Blind. Other council courtesies this evening? Do we have any other council courtesies? Okay, thank you. I'll just move into proclamations. We have 5 proclamations tonight. We have a long agenda, 11 different items. There should be a copy of the agenda on the very back if you have not seen that. We've often, when we get to public comment on non-public hearing items, I'll ask whether there are also people who would like to comment on things that are not on our agenda tonight. And if the council wills it, we can adjust our schedule to let you make your comments at the beginning of the meeting, so you can go home and not have to wait until 4 a.m. this morning, which hopefully you'll appreciate. So we'll address that when we get to it. But let me start off with first our I see people who we'd like to present the Juneteenth Proclamation. So with that, I'm going to read the proclamation concerning Juneteenth. Whereas in 2017, the Montana legislature adopted a bill establishing Juneteenth National Freedom Day on the third Saturday of June to celebrate African American emancipation from slavery, the freedom won by people in many countries, and to rededicate ourselves to the cause of liberty. And whereas Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. And whereas it was on June 19, 1865, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation and 2 months after General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate troops, that Union soldiers at last landed in Galveston, Texas, bringing the news of the Civil War, that it had ended and that the last African Americans living in bondage were finally free. And whereas the story of almost 500 years of slavery in North America and its abolition received relatively little attention in our history books, and Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to learn more and never forget our ancestors who endured one of the worst slave experiences in human history. And whereas every day African Americans in our nation are reminded of the legacy of slavery, and Juneteenth provides a way to acknowledge the reality of that experience, celebrate the fortitude of the human heart, and claim the promise of deliverance. And whereas Juneteenth National Freedom Day reminds every Montanan, regardless of his or her race or ethnic background, to savor the joy of freedom and reflect on where we have been and where we are going as a people. And whereas we should all admire the example of our enslaved ancestors and who never gave up hope, and whose perseverance inspired African-American heroism during the Civil War and helped launch the civil rights era of today. And whereas we stand together in proclaiming that all men and women are created equal and deserving of freedom, respect, and love, now therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim Saturday, June 18, 2022 as Juneteenth Day in Billings, and invite the citizens of our city to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies and activities celebrating freedom. And I see that Pastor Melvin Terry is with us today. And so, Pastor Terry, if you would like to come forward, and if I can give you make a presentation of this proclamation, it would be an honor. And I don't know, feel free to take that, and if you have any short, but here you got to turn and smile for your photographer that is with us at all times. All right, very good. And if you've got any comments, feel free to make them. But
Proclamation, first of all, welcome. Thank you for having me here today. I am the president of the Black Heritage Foundation here in Billings, Montana, and the surrounding counties of Yellowstone. And Juneteenth this year will be at North Park. It'll be held on the 18th of June, and it'll start between 1 and 5. So there'll be fun there, music, food, games, and all type of things. So I'd like to invite you all, if you have the availability, to please come. All are welcome. We love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
He has some flyers to pass out to each one of you. Want to pass those to him?
That'd be great. If you can just give them to Chris, and Chris will make sure we get them all. Thank you very much. Our next proclamation is in recognition of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Whereas older adults deserve to be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and vital participating members of our communities. And whereas 2022 marks the 16th annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, its recognition will promote better understanding of abuse and neglect of older adults. And whereas the National Center for Elder Abuse, Adult Protective Services of Montana, Eastern Montana Elder Justice Council, and the Adult Resource Alliance of Yellowstone County recognize the importance of taking action to raise awareness, prevent elder abuse, and whereas it's up to all of us to ensure that proper social structures exist so people can retain community and societal connections, reducing the likelihood of abuse. And whereas preventing abuse of older adults through maintaining and improving social supports like senior centers, human services, and transportation will allow everyone to continue to live as independently as possible and contribute to the life and vibrancy of our communities. And whereas where there is justice, there can be no abuse, and therefore the organizations listed above urge all people to restore justice by honoring older adults. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim June 15, 2022 as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and encourage all of our communities to recognize and celebrate older adults and their ongoing contributions to the success and vitality of our country. Then we have Men's Health Month. Despite advances in medical technology and research, men continue to live an average of 5 years less than women, with Native American and African American women having the lowest life expectancy. And whereas during the COVID-19 pandemic, a significantly disproportionate number of men compared to women have died due to the disease, owing to social factors, biological factors, and a greater reluctance to be vaccinated. And whereas educating the public and health care providers about the importance of a healthy lifestyle, regular health screenings, and early detection of male health problems will reduce male mortality rates. And whereas fathers who stay connected to their children and maintain a healthy lifestyle are more likely to be respected as role models and have happier, healthier children. And whereas Men's Health Network has worked with Congress to develop a special campaign to help educate men, boys, and their families about the importance of positive health attitudes and preventative health practices. And whereas the Men's Health Month website has been established at www.menshealthmonth.org and features resources and information about health-related activities, including Wear Blue Day and men's health issues, including heart disease, mental health, diabetes, prostate, testicular, and colon cancer. And whereas the citizens of Billings are encouraged to educate themselves about the importance of a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, and medical checkups. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim June 2022 as Men's Health Month in Billings and encourage all our citizens to pursue preventative health practices and early detection efforts throughout the year. The next proclamation is in recognition of Pride Month and was requested by Walt Donges, president of 406 Pride and Resource Center here in Billings. The proclamation was requested several weeks ago and before the controversy erupted over Zoo Montana's decision to host Drag Queen Story Hour. And other mayors have issued similar proclamations going back to 2007. Therefore, the decision to read the proclamation shouldn't be interpreted in any way as approval or other commentary on events held at the zoo, but the substance of the proclamation is still important, perhaps now more than ever. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the month of June is commonly celebrated and recognized as LGBTQ plus Pride Month, and it is a time when LGBTQ people, their friends, allies, and family gather to celebrate their diversity, reduce fear and prejudice, and strengthen community bonds. And whereas the people of Billings desire to support each other and have a proud history of speaking out against intolerance, hate, violence, and discrimination. And whereas two-spirit, transgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and queer Montanans have made and continue to make great, lasting, and important contributions to our city and state, sometimes living in fear while they do so. And whereas LGBTQ people strengthen the fabric of our community through their work in all sectors of our economy and as parents, friends, co-workers, and volunteers. And whereas 406 Pride, a 501c3 nonprofit corporation located in Billings continues to work to educate, support, and organize individuals, businesses, and nonprofits to ensure that LGBTQ members of the community continue to thrive in the Magic City. And whereas LGBTQ people have people have been marginalized and denied their civil rights, and through determination, dedication, and love of country have fought to have their rights defined and recognized by the Supreme Court. And whereas the City of Billings is a welcoming, tolerant, and accepting community of law-abiding citizens who believe in the freedoms of assembly and speech enshrined in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby encourage our citizens to reflect on the contributions that LGBTQ+ people have made to the City of Billings, the ongoing struggle for acceptance many LGBTQ people continue to face, and the need to create an inclusive society that celebrates diversity and values our common humanity, and to welcome 406 Pride and our LGBTQ+ friends and neighbors to celebrate Billings Pride 2022, Community and Connection in downtown Billings on Saturday, June 25, 2022. Before I move on, I do want to acknowledge that the Billings Chamber of Commerce has put out a public bulletin defending the Drag Queen Story Hour, and stating that the event has, quote, resulted in both threats of violence and disgraceful allegations against the director of Zoo Montana. The Chamber's statement criticizes a tweet from Representative Rosendale that says the representative is, quote, appalled by Zoo Montana's decision to promote child abuse and expose children to inappropriate sexual content. The Chamber challenges all political leaders, starting with me, to unequivocally and publicly denounce all threats of violence and unsubstantiated allegations against the director of Zoo Montana. I have no personal knowledge of the number or materiality of the threats of physical violence mentioned by the Chamber. Reasonable minds might differ on whether the wiser course is to shine the bright light of public scrutiny on such threats if it is not clear that they pose an existential threat, or instead to downplay such threats in the hope that the lack of attention might prevent them from metastasizing further. But since the Chamber has already made that decision for us, let me be clear and unequivocal. Any credible threat of physical violence is beyond the pale, likely illegal, and will not be tolerated in Billings, Montana. Similarly, unfounded claims that the zoo intends to, quote, promote child abuse, close quote, or that the zoo director is a pedophile, as stated in two emails sent to the City Council from individuals with the same last name, are morally unacceptable, corrosive, and perhaps slanderous and legally actionable. Billings is better than that. Zoo Montana is a private, non-governmental, nonprofit corporation with no link to the City of Billings. And I, for one, do not think that local government should tell that private organization or any private organization to whom they can and cannot rent their facilities. Others disagree with me and believe that city government should wave a non-existent legal wand and simply ban Drag Queen Story Hour. That is not possible. But if the event concerns you, please do not go. Still others think that the city should pass an ordinance that would require every private, non-governmental organization that rents out its facilities to the public to host a Drag Queen Story Hour if requested, or face governmental sanctions and lawsuits that could easily bankrupt any small business that decided that it did not want to rent its own facility out for that purpose. The former is no more defensible than the latter, and the latter is no more defensible than the former, in my opinion. Many in our community would have us believe that Drag Queen Story Hour is just harmless fun intended to teach children valuable life lessons. From their perspective, that belief is correct and sincerely expressed. But the view that normalization of gender fluidity and homosexual behavior is something to be positively modeled for children of every age is not universally held in our community by people with equal sincerity. Children are special, and they are uniquely susceptible to influence by others. It's presumptuous not to acknowledge that many in our community will have a legitimate difference of opinion on an event such as this. Billings is better than that, too. So that's my, concludes that proclamation. We have one final one, Montana Football Hall of Fame Day. Whereas nearly 150 student athletes from Montana high schools play collegiate football each year, and whereas 270 Montana collegiate student athletes have gone on to play professional football since 1926, and whereas Montana has more student athletes per capita than any other state who go on to play football in the NFL and Canadian Football League, and whereas these NFL, CFL veterans have not had their achievements noted or archived for future generations of Montanans, and whereas these athletes have valuable insights and stories to tell, and whereas former Eastern Montana College football student athletes formed the Big Huddle, an organization providing a forum for these professional athletes to tell their stories and share their experiences. And whereas the Big Huddle organization has grown to be the current Montana Pro Football Hall of Fame and wishes for our city mayor, Yellowstone County, and our state of Montana to recognize the significance of these achievements. Therefore, be it resolved that I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim the last Saturday of each June as Montana Football Hall of Fame Day and encourage residents to recognize the positive impact our Montana pro football athletes have on our universities and to thank them for giving back to their communities. And that concludes our proclamations for this evening. If anybody has any more, then we'll have to do them in two weeks. I see Walt Donges in the back, and Walt, we try to give anybody who's offered a proclamation, anybody else whose proclamation I read who also wanted to comment, please stand up and please do so. Walt?
Thank you, and I know that I'm early on the agenda here. Thank you very much for your support. As you see, the things have started to happen with the community. We just want to say we're hanging strong. Jeff and I are working together to make as much of this stuff happen as possible. We can't back down, as you stated. And I'm here to request if we could have a copy of that to read to my crew, please.
Absolutely. Can we email it to you?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes then the proclamation section of our meeting and brings us then to council reports. Are there any council reports for members of the City Council on concerning other organizations that we serve on? Councilmember Tricky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a very good meeting this morning with Leonard Smith of the Native American Development Council, and they're involved in a lot of really interesting things that are going on. I'm not going to dive into it in any depth at this point, but I do think that we as a council should work to have a closer relationship with that economic development group, and I intend to work on that.
Very good. Thank you. Any other council reports? Seeing none, city administrator reports. Chris.
Mayor and Council got a handful of items first for tonight's meeting. So would like a request per the applicant and the city staff that council by majority vote consider removing agenda item number 11 this evening, which is the bid award concerning city-owned parcels. Also prefer that not be a date certain return back. We've had a couple of meetings and we'll have a few more. Frankly, not only with the potential land exchange, but I would argue more importantly, the development of the property, period. As you know, since the property was annexed, then de-annexed, we now will have water and sewer going in the right-of-way in front of it. So we're having a broader discussion about what the future of that property will be from a development standpoint. So that does require a vote of a majority of the council if you're inclined to remove item 11. Second up, there was one ex parte item concerning consent agenda 11 sent to the mayor and council after 3 p.m. this afternoon, and that's in the folder. Next up is a heads up for you. So hopefully this is a non-issue, but I think it's appropriate to flag for you. So it has to do with my labor contract between the city and myself, of which in the contract under term, it has this second sentence. This agreement shall be renewed for a 2-year term automatically on January 1st, in this case 2023, or every 2 years thereafter, so it was 2021, this would be 2023, unless notice to terminate is given by the employer at least 6 months in advance. So we're just a couple weeks out from that July 1 deadline. No action has to be taken. Selfishly for me, I hope there is no action coming that I'm not aware of, but just flagging that for you that is in our contract, and I'll put it in the weekly so you've got it in writing as well. And fourth, back to, frankly, our first item. I'm going to have Debbie come up and give you a little bit of an update on risk associated with flooding, and then also she's coming up to the podium, let you know that we are working. So I'll be stepping out between ourselves and Billings Clinic to hopefully offer some assistance to Billings Clinic there in Red Lodge as they're looking for some vehicles to move folks. So as the mayor stated earlier, and it certainly be my approach, anything we can do to help them, we will do, and we'll figure out, how to deal with that as things go on. So Debbie, you want to let us know what our risk here is in the city of Billings?
Sure. As you know, I love graphs and charts, so I brought graphs and charts. You can see we're sitting right about 12.8. So this is one point in the river, just going back, that we monitor. It relates to our storm drain outfalls. It relates to our water plant, our wastewater plant, anything on the river. We kind of use this gauge right here. So we were sitting at 12.8 today, which is concerning, but they expect it will peak at about 14.2 is what they're saying right now. So you can see that number up here. For reference, if you remember 2018, we had a lot of damage in 2018 with the river and what it was doing, and that was at 13.47. So it was not as high in 2018 as what we're supposed to see tomorrow. So definitely a big number. I was just going to show you that $3.5 million we spent on the city county drain. It is still holding the river back, so we're good. It will not hold it back all night. At some point tonight, it's going to overtop this structure, which is fine. When it overtops it, we've got a pipe that can take it. But anyway, bottom line on all this, our storm drain outfalls, 3 of them will be pretty close to underwater. So if we get a lot of precipitation in the city, you're going to see some standing water. It'll drain out, but pretty slowly. The water plant and the wastewater plant, few operational changes, but we're able to keep going. We really don't have problems till we get to 15. So 15 right there, that's the number that we're going to have concerns, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that high. So quick update.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Debbie or Chris on any of those topics? Well, okay. Thank you, Chris. Then, before we move on, council, to public comment on non-public hearing items, let's address those 2 scheduling items. Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion to adjust the agenda before us to remove item number 11 and to move public comment of non-agenda items to the next item at hand with a time limit of 1 hour, and then to resume it again at the end of our meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Purington seconds that. So again, the motion, 2 items. Take item 11 off the agenda and move public comment on non-agenda items up to our next item, but not remove it from the end.
Exactly.
And a 1 hour time limit, but I'm hoping we would not.
I don't think we'll exceed that, but I just wanted to make sure that
Just in case.
just in case they're listening and people come in.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, so any discussion on the motion? Is the motion clear? Okay, we'll have a vote. If in favor of that motion, which has those 2 parts, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 11 will be removed from the agenda. And our next item up will be public comment on non-agenda items. So let me translate that into English for anybody who might not be familiar with our procedures. Normally, if something is not on our agenda and somebody wants to comment on something not on our agenda, they got to wait until the end of the meeting. We don't want to make anybody out there wait that long, given the length of our meeting tonight. So if you'd like to comment on something that is not on our agenda, please come forward at this time. Make your public comment. You'll have 3 minutes. Just ask that you give us your name and address up front. And if you are in the unlikely situation where you stick around to the very end of the meeting, you only get 1 bite of this apple. So decide whether you wanted to use it now or wait till the end of the meeting. So anyway, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Anything that was not on our agenda tonight? Please come forward.
Hello, thank you for this time. My name is Shelley Mann. I live at 1006 Mary Street up in the Heights of Billings. And thank you for moving this up. I appreciate that as well. I am here to thank you for proclaiming June Pride Month in Billings. My family and I do stand here, well, I stand here, my family stands with me in support of diversity in Billings. I do also stand before you today in support of our zoo. I am sorry that you all were dragged into this because this, we all know, is beyond your purview. You have seen some of the hateful and poisonous words that have been directed at our zoo director and at his staff. Jeff has been the victim of threats, and Mr. Mayor, I would certainly be willing to share specifics with you on those. I do not believe it appropriate to share names and threats at this time, but just a couple of examples. He has been told, "I know where you live." I would be fearful if someone in anger said that to me for myself and my family. He has also been told, "You pedophiles need to vacate Montana or else." I do believe these rise to threats, and there's more. But what I want to say here is that too many in our society have forgotten the importance of just simply showing grace in the midst of disagreement. We can all do that, both sides. It is sad what we are seeing here. But again, I do want to say that I stand here in support of diversity. I stand here in support of free enterprise. And I do stand here in support of Zoo Montana. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on items not on our agenda this evening? And if there are more people, please make a little line behind there so we have less transition time.
Mayor Cole and City Council members, my name is Susan Smith, and I live at 6133 Timber Cove Drive in Billings, Montana. Today we may be consumed with concern, anxiety, and fear with the battle of war in other countries, our southern border, high gas prices, shortages in foods and goods, the spiraling downtrend of the economy, unusual and devastating natural disasters, and the list goes on. But the bigger battle and war we should be most concerned about is the war against the destruction of the nuclear family as a fundamental unit of society. This is the biggest threat to society. If the family is destroyed, nothing else really matters. The family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children, a home where a marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God and where God's principles are taught becomes a refuge from the storms of life. The downfall of this nation will be from the storms within our hearts, our minds, and our souls, not wars, natural disasters, or politics. We all need to wake up, fathers and mothers, sisters and brothers, community leaders, instead of being woke and being fed with a lot of misinformation and lies and succumbing, accepting, and being compliant to their will, but not understanding how we need to protect our families has become a worldwide issue. We have laws and statutes that are made to protect our families and especially our innocent children. The mayor and city council do have a duty and responsibility to abide by those laws and statutes. The question is, are you willing to risk it all? For what? What side of truth are you on? Are you willing to publicly oppose these 406 Pride festivities? But more importantly, fathers and mothers need to step up and protect and strengthen their families. Wake up, husband and wife. The sacred union of man and woman have a solemn responsibility to love and care for their children. Children are an heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is his reward. Children are his gift to us. This is a super GMA call to action. As I have 31 grandchildren whom I have stewardship and investment in, they are my heritage. We must understand the severity of this battle. I'm personally calling all mama bears and grandma bears to step up to the plate and protect their young from the crime scene. Be a force to be reckoned with, strong, determined, unstoppable, full of boundless energy and love for your family, and to do it with fierceness as a mama bear would protect her cubs. But put on the whole armor, your loins girt with truth, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the sword of spirit, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. For light is imperishable, and all lies die, and truth alone remains, not wokeism. The sanctity of life is most important in God's eternal plan. It's really all about spiritual warfare. This is a moral issue. Make no mistake. This is a contentious issue. Our families and children are at risk. Truth can't be lies and lies can't be truth. When we violate those covenants and abuse our children, one day we'll be accountable to God for it, and this is not good. Here are a few thoughts. A perspective being good. Identity. They say we can be whatever we want to be. This is a lie of contemporary culture. That is not even true. Evil can't be good, and good can't be evil. God can't be the devil, and the devil can't be God. Nothing can be what it is not. That is a law of contradiction. This
Susan, if you could
popular
just wrap up,
self-contradiction.
just because your time's up.
Oh, well, I just want to say that I am very much against the festivities, and especially in regard to the doubts and the confusion that are put in children's minds and putting them at risk when they are already suffering, and we have higher rates of suicide and crime and everything else. And we need to protect our children and to save them from those things that would harm them the most.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Stacy Samuelson. My address is 1615 Avenue F. Good evening, Mayor Cole, City Council members, and residents of Yellowstone County. I've lived in Billings for 43 years, and I've seen some things recently changing that are very concerning to me. I home educate my children, and I teach them to look at both sides of an issue, which includes researching both sides and asking thoughtful questions about it before deciding which is the right side to defend. I would like to also say that I have not sent any emails, any threatening comments, or phone conversations to any person. This is my first public comment, I should say. This quote sums up what we're dealing with in a concise explanation of the LGBTQ movement. Quote, everything about the trans movement and most elements of the LGBTQ movement are sex-related. Their entire identities revolve around who they sleep with and turning those habits into activism. I don't think this is really debatable. All you have to do is watch any pride parade, and the entire affair is centered on sexualization. So why feel the need to bring children into that environment when they are nowhere near mature enough to comprehend it and can even be damaged by it? Unquote. Brandon Smith. I have extensively looked at both sides of the LGBTQ movement, and I've asked thoughtful questions, and I hope that you have all as well. In case you have not had time, a lot has been going on, and I would grant you that we're getting hit by one thing after another over a very short amount of time. Here's a short list of questions to ponder. Do you know what books are being read at the zoo event? Most likely not, since they are not releasing it. A popular read-aloud book is It's Perfectly Normal. Please take a look or Google this, and I'm sure you can find pictures of that comic book look at what sexualization should be for children. Do you agree with this movement whose goal is to continue to confuse children about what is a man and what is a woman? And boys can be girls and girls can be boys. Do you condone this movement whose goal is to groom children? Are you okay, and would you bring your children or grandchildren to a place where satanic costumes are being worn? Because if you look at any pictures on the internet, they are wearing satanic costumes, they have demonic voices, and this is scary. It's scary enough seeing a man dressed as a woman and have a man's voice. Why is this movement trying to normalize Satan and demons? Ask yourself these questions. This is such a bigger question than we need more rights. An event like this family-friendly event at the zoo is normalizing men dressed as women and being near children. Are you okay with normalizing drag and normalizing pedophilia? Do you know that puberty cannot be paused? This is being quoted all over the internet. Many psychologists are saying this is possible.
Steve, if I just ask you to wrap up because your time is up.
Okay. Also, would you please research Alfred Kinsey and John Money? This is being taught to psychologists today. They're awful teachings. Is this the future we want to give to our children of this community? We are the adults, and we have to protect innocent lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Penny Levy. I live at 1411 Emma. And I just want to comment on all the flooding in Red Lodge and Absorki. And I have 2 homes that are open if anybody knows of anybody who needs a house. So, thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Further public comment?
I'm Jessie Browning. I live at 1315 Muckle Trail in Billings. And I did send a note to Jeff at the zoo, and I tried my hardest to be respectful, and he sent a very respectful, gracious note back. So I'll just make a note of that. So thank you for your time. I'm a born and raised Montanan, mother of 4, and I'm a deeply concerned citizen regarding the events that are scheduled next week. Specifically, not just the Pride event, but specifically the Drag Queen Story Hour at the zoo and the drag show that is scheduled for Saturday, where children are welcome and enjoying and encouraged to join. I believe every person has worth and value. Everyone does. They have a potential to be a force for good and a benefit to society. And I also believe as an adult, you should be free to do what you want with another consenting adult. However, I feel that it is highly inappropriate and deeply suspect when you target your attention on including children in your sexual displays. There has become such an intense fixation on doing this throughout our nation. Children are vulnerable, and they need adults to stand up for them against grooming behavior. Boys and girls are being indoctrinated into immoral and confusing ideologies. They are unconsenting subjects of progressive agendas and social experiments, and that is so harmful. There is no innocent, non-predatory reason for grown men to want to put on makeup, wigs, and dresses to purposely spend time with impressionable children. To say otherwise is a denial of reality. This is targeting children, and the goal is destruction of any kind of moral right or wrong. This is grooming children for abuse, and it preys upon their innocence. This behavior around children should be criminalized, not celebrated and encouraged. So I'm just calling upon the mayor and the city council to do what you can to stand up for the protection of children against the targeted destructive behavior. These people do have a right to gather for drag shows and whatever else they want to do with consenting adults, but they should not be allowed to parade around and put on shows purposely targeting the children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next public comment? Any further public comment on something not on our agenda this evening? Do not see anybody coming forward. Nobody online, so we will close the public comment period. Councilmember Purington.
Oh, I'll just say Frank came in after that, and I know that he's here for non-public.
Oh, okay. Thank you for alerting us. So, former Councilmember Ewald back there, we are doing something a little bit different so that you don't have to stay here till 4 a.m. like usual. If you have something that you'd like to comment on that is not on our public agenda tonight, you'll also have an opportunity later, but you only get one bite at the apple. So if you've got something, shoot.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting this. Wow. That's really good. So I would like to commend you for your efforts to have neighborhoods plan and put on a barbecue in the interest of more safety. It is always a good thing when neighbors can get together and build their community and share. This is the premise behind the Neighborhood Watch program. Mayor, you and the council can even make these neighborhoods stronger, safer, and more secure. You only need to take the initiative and place a cap on pre-releases and parolees sent to Billings. Don't continue to let the state pass their responsibilities for criminal incarceration in disproportionate numbers onto Billings and Yellowstone County. MCA 35-1-2022 is actually an act of oppression against Billings through the tyranny of the DOC. This is per the definition in the Webster Dictionary, where one entity can pass rules on to others and separate them. Please represent and protect the residents who entrusted you in this leadership role. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Didn't see any, so we will close that portion of our meeting and move ahead. Councilmember Bernice?
Mayor, with the lady who offered her house, and there may be others out there, is there something our PIO officer can maybe put out, get them in connect with maybe someone, I don't know if the Red Cross is working on this or not, but is there some way we can get some information about that if there's some additional assistances out there?
Yeah, I guess what I would recommend is that if you can leave your name, send an email to Victoria Hall.
Here's my information on my pen.
Ah, hey, that's handy. We have that. So anybody who might be watching, rather than putting that out to might be several thousand people watching and have you get several thousand phone calls, they can contact our public information officer. Will that work, Councilmember?
I think that would be a good idea. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
I put groceries in there and everything, so.
Wow, that's great. All right, thank you very much. We may all be visiting soon, depending on how that chart looks. It's Debbie's chart. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes then that portion. We'll move on to public comment on agenda items for which there is no hearing. So tonight, that is items 1, the consent agenda. So anything on the consent agenda. Item 7A, the Harnish Property Annexation Agreement. And item number 11 is now off our agenda. So just those two items. If anybody would like to comment on anything on the consent agenda or the Harnish Property Annexation Agreement, now is your opportunity. Come up, tell us your name, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Everything else, there will be a public hearing for when we get to that item. So don't worry about that. But now is the time, and only now, to comment on anything on the consent agenda. That's item 1 and any of the sub-items, or item 7A. Is there any public comment on those items? Any public comment on those items? Okay, we'll hear from you later if you want to when we get to public hearings. Bring us to consent agenda. I'm going to ask for separations. I'm going to offer the very first one. Well, not separation for a separate vote. I think because these are my recommendations on item A, number 1, item 1A1, the revolving loan committee members. This issue came up by email. You probably saw it. Heather Kirkpatch, we appreciate her applying for a position, but she does not live in the city.
Jennifer Stark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer Stark. Yeah, I apologize. Thank you. Does not live in the city, and our city attorney has told us that that requirement does apply to this board, and so she is ineligible. And so I am withdrawing that recommendation. We'll have one vacancy. Fortunately, we do have another commercial lender who has to be appointed, Lucy Aspinwall, whose name I'll submit for our next meeting in 2 weeks for approval there. So just as a heads up on that item. So others, are there actual requests for separation for separate vote on any of the items on the consent agenda? Councilmember Bowen?
Item N, please, Mayor.
Item N, resolution to contribute council contingency funds.
Yes.
Any further separations? Councilmember Bernice.
I move to approve the items on the consent agenda as submitted with the exception of items removed for separation, which is 1N, and the removal of Jennifer Stark, item 1A12 from the consent agenda.
Okay, before I ask for a second, I just want to make sure there were no other separations. Don't see any. So is there a second to that motion? Councilmember Gulick. Motion's made, seconded. Discussion on the motion or items that have not been separated. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I wasn't sure, is this a good time to ask a question of Director Whitaker about the Castle Rock Park playground equipment?
Absolutely. Councilmember Mike, you want to come forward?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening, Director Whitaker. I was just going to ask, this particular, I don't recall that we've used this process before for putting in playground equipment at parks. And as I well know, constituents have called me about sometimes how long it takes for equipment to be installed. So I was just going to ask, is this a process that you think will continue on? Is this a process that will be used with other park equipment, playground equipment replacement? Thank you.
Councilmember Joy, the process that we usually utilize is we like to purchase equipment through state contract pricing, and that speeds up the process by at least a month and a half. We also usually use our parks crew if there's existing playground equipment out there. We remove that, and we also use our parks crew to put down the fall protection. So, does that answer your question, or?
Well, in regards to the difference in terms of the money for the construction, actually putting in that part of it, is that any part of the process that's different? Maybe I'm confused. Thank you.
Councilmember Joy, Castle Rock Park is unique because there's not already a pod out there. Okay, so that's why we're hiring a contractor to come in to put in the pod and put in an accessible route all the way from the parking area to the playground. That's usually standard. We did that at Rose Park. We did modifications there, and we hired LA to do the drawings, and we bidded that project to add additional walkway and modify the pods out there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any question for you, Mike, so thank you. I'm just going to make a comment. So I'm not going to really ask for further direction, but on item 1M, Sunny Cove Fruit Farm, the right-of-way, that's transfers a bit of land to MDOT. I drove that area this weekend and was just reminded how much residential subdivision exists between Rimrock and Grand Avenue. And in small, call them ranchettes. And that exists because Sunny Cove Fruit Farm, you see this property is part of Sunny Cove Fruit Farms, the subdivision goes back almost 100 years and was chopped up, and people have now bought 5, 10, 20 acre pieces, put houses down over that 100-year period. And so I have some concern that we are looking at what I would call a de facto growth boundary that may make it very difficult for Billings to annex and expand between Rimrock and Grand Avenue. In the past, we've been able to acquire, farmers have come in with a 100-acre subdivision, and we've kind of proceeded naturally out. If you have houses built in the middle of a road, or you just have a homeowner who does not have any interest in developing their property, I'm just concerned about that. So I just alert that for staff. I'm thinking that's something that we're going to have to ask our staff to study in the future, what we're looking at in that very critical area, because there's a high demand for residential in that northwest part of town. Further discussion on the motion, any of the non-separated items. Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, can we have someone speak to item number D, the lobbying contract? I'd like to hear what in the past the lobbyists have done for the city, and then also what we expect the lobbyists to do for us in the future. This is $90,000. That's more than the average wage of an individual, and I'd like to see what this brings to the city.
So, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, happy to talk about it at a high level. We have had, so over the past, say, approximately 3 years, we did enter into our first contract for federal lobbyists. Specifically, as we're hearing, there are several grant opportunities available, and through the infrastructure and other bills that have been passed most recently, we are looking for, and in this case, expecting to develop a partnership where we've got folks on the ground in Washington, D.C. who have relationships with and are communicating not just with our politicians. Candidly and frankly, in Montana, we have this luxury where we know our senators and our representatives on a first name basis. But we don't have those kind of relationships and knowledge of what goes on at frankly, I'll use at the staff level in the various departments and divisions at the federal government level. So it's most recently the BUILD grant was what the most recent grant the city received, a very sizable nature. And we'll never know for certain. As you ask the questions, so did our lobbyist get us that grant? Would we have gotten that grant without those services? We don't know the answer to that question, but we know in this case it didn't hurt us. We did get it, and it's positive. As we look forward in the most immediate, it's been the build grant, or I'm sorry, not build, BRIC, thank you. The BRIC grant, which is up to $50 million relative to our reservoir project. But I want to be careful not to put all of our eggs in one basket. Part of this realization is what are the opportunities where the federal government has created resources to be available to a community like ours that we're not aware of. And that's predominantly what this relationship, only over time will we, I think, be able to determine, okay, is this a wise investment on our part, or is it an investment we should end? And my speculation is you're going to need anywhere from 24 to 36 months minimum to really be able to respond back as to whether this really is an investment that pays off. If it is, I will encourage us to continue. If it doesn't, yeah, we shouldn't. We could use this $90,000 other ways.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion before we proceed to a vote? Okay, if not, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval. All of the items on the consent agenda with the exception of item 1N. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 1N is the next item up. Councilmember Owen, that was your separation. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I think there's a number of council members perhaps who want to talk about this and understand a little bit more. So I'll just begin with my questions. I think when this initiative was raised, I understood it to be part of, or perhaps the COVID memorial for our community, the thing that had been talked about at Stillwater Building, the sort of the piece. And I think maybe I'm not correct on that. So I was hoping to hear a little additional information, where this sort of fits in the scheme of other council initiatives to have a memorial in the community at Stillwater or somewhere else. I think I could use a little more information.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Treaky. My understanding is you're right, it is not. This is a memorial light and fast through the YAM. But Councilmember Treaky?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Those exact words. Man, we have this mental telepathy going. Okay, but further discussion. Councilmember Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. I have concerns about this as well, and more about the process of when we do an initiative and then it shows up on the agenda where it's looking like we're going to approve it. We're using taxpayer funds that are utilized, and it's out of the council contingency fund, which is, I guess, a slush fund. There's no policy on how we're supposed to use that. There's no direction in ordinance. There's no expectation. And I look at this as, just using funds for a community event. And I'm not so sure these are the type of funds that I would like to spend those on. And I think we should have a more detailed discussion about the council contingency funds and really what's an appropriate spend. My expectation would be these would be some type of an emergency we have to step up and help with, something that is more of an emergency type fund or something like that. Now, we have done some things in the past with it. I think we supported the USS Billings with it. That was prior to my time on the council, and that was, a promotion of the city really throughout the nation with that. So I think that we need to step back, and I don't supporting taking these funds and just handing them out in a grant fashion to people who come in and ask council members for money for their favorite organization.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I'll just add the perspective that we haven't spent council contingency funds since I've been on council on anything. So I honestly am just excited to see a council member come forward with a proposal to do something with this funding that we're supposed to be helping the community with. But I want to go back to Councilmember Owen's question and just to update you a little bit on the last time that the kind of group got together that has been just kind of kicking this around. And the mayor's been in some of those meetings, and so is Councilmember Chiriki and someone from Riverstone and just a few other people, just general conversations. And without committing anybody to anything, we kind of moved away from the idea of trying to raise like a bunch of money for some kind of like private statue, but thought maybe instead we would try and come up with some kind of collaborative solution. One of the ideas that was thrown around was like, what if we do something like the walk outside of the art museum, that's something baked into the sidewalk, something like that around the Stillwater building? Or what if we come up with a partnership opportunity that kind of looks like that? So just to add for, nothing has been decided in any way, but that was the last kind of conversation.
Okay, thank you. I'll just comment that in recognition of Councilmember Neese's point that, there's not a lot of procedures, not a lot of guardrails on this, except the very small dollar amount. The total amount that we have is $25,000, and I think that is the biggest guardrail. And the intent is high flexibility. And too many rules could limit that flexibility. In this particular case, I just think it's important to remember that the reason we have been able to get through our last couple of years is because of the COVID relief dollars, specifically the more than $20 million that came through the CARES Act, and I believe roughly $16 million from ARPA, American Rescue Plan dollars. So more than $36 million that we've used to build a new Law and Justice Center, City Hall, pay for police and fire through the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So I just did the math. I don't have it in front of me, but I divided this $1,000 ask into that $36+ million. And it was like 6 or 7 zeros, 3% of those dollars. And we would not have those dollars but for the 555, now more, 561 people who've died in Yellowstone County, sadly. And so, although I'm sensitive to those procedural issues, in this case, the recognition of the cost to our community and the desire not to forget that, I think is very, very important. So that's why I will vote for it. Councilmember Purinton, Councilmember Boyette.
And I think, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think, Mr. Mayor, you brought up an excellent point procedurally. And with the discussion, and I had the same question, whether or not this was part of what was going to happen with Stillwater building, and then just what Councilmember Shaw brought up was, well, and that's why I understood, is that Stillwater group are kind of still kicking around something. So I think when we're still kicking something around, but we're using taxpayer dollars, would it be that, these people had died? And so I'm not looking at those percentages. I'm not looking at that at this point. I'm looking at a procedure that we use council contingency funds. They were used for the USS Billings. I know they tapped them out for 2 to 3 years. And before that, I don't know exactly what they were used for. I know that our city administrator has mentioned something for training for council members. So I think that needs to come to fruition before we just start piecemealing it out, because that's what I feel like we're doing, is that we're piecemealing. And I mean, we could come up with something that is for $25,000. So I will not vote for this resolution.
Thank you very much. Councilor Boyette, Councilor Chiriki. And then let's, Councilor, try to move to a vote soon, just because we got a lot
Thank you, Mayor.
ahead of us.
I think Councilman Chiriki brought this up a long time ago, that we need some sort of a memorial at the Stillwater building. I was thinking something more substantial, like a plaque or a wall hanging or something, rather than just a painting that characterized what happened. Maybe a story about, for 20 or 30 years from now, people can look back and say, why is the building here? And these are the people that suffered for it, rather than $1,000. I thought this would cost a lot more for something more substantial. So I'm really going more for Stillwater building having its own plaque, its own thing, rather than individuals, $1,000 here, $1,000 there.
And I'll just remind council, this contribution is not the cost of the project, it's just the city's contribution to the project, but it's still a relatively low-cost project. Councilman Tricky?
Two things. So the memorial we're talking about for the Stillwater building, that committee is still meeting. It's still working on it. That will happen. This was just a small project that's being put on by YAM, where they're having a bunch of students come in and they're working with the students, exposing them to art and doing a mural kind of thing. And it seems like a good project in and of itself, but on top of it, with all the things that the mayor said. I will remind everyone that we actually have two pieces of process that are in place, and they are the ones that have been in place for forever for this type of a project. It has to be within the budget. The numbers have to be put into the budget, which we did last year. We put $25,000 into the budget to be used at the council's discretion. And the other part of the procedure is the council's discretion. 6 people have to agree that this is a good idea. You don't think it's a good idea? That's fine. But waiting to put an entirely new process in place in order to do this is, to me, just an excuse to say, no, I don't want to do this. So, if you really think we need a process, then I hope that you will work to bring one forward, because elsewise we will never be able to spend any of these dollars.
Okay, anything else before we vote, council? Councilor Shaw?
Is there a motion?
Oh, no,
I was going to make a motion.
Would you make the?
Yeah. I move to approve item 1N.
And second by Councilmember Joy. Okay, so the motion is for approval. We'll have a hand count. If in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Shaw, Gulick, Joy, Cole, Chiriki, and Rupsis. If voting in opposition, raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Neese, Owen, Purington, Tidswell, and Boyett. So the ayes have it. Motion passes 6-5. That concludes the consent agenda and brings us to our regular agenda. Item number 2. Tony, would you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2, public hearing and resolution approving and adopting FY22 budget amendments. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Our presenter this evening is our finance director, Andy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I have before you tonight, I believe it's 9 budget amendments for fiscal year 22, which we're wrapping up. And we're going to go through them briefly. And we'll get started. The first one is for $300,000 for kind of the ongoing carrying cost of the Stillwater building. This is funded through rent revenue of about $252,000. And then the additional funding would come from the funds set aside for purchase, construction, ownership costs of the Stillwater building. These were not included in the FY22 budget because we didn't buy this building until fiscal year 22. The next one is for the facilities hail claim. We received significant damage to a lot of city facilities. In the FY22 budget, we included an estimate of $2.8 million. The actual insurance reimbursement was for $3.16 million, so we're asking for a budget amendment to be able to spend the entire insurance claim to repair city facilities. So it's an additional $360,000. The next one is the Parks Construction Fund for $71,000. These funds were set aside back in FY19, $2 million from the general fund and $460,000 from cash in lieu for Centennial Park Phase 1. That project is now complete, and there are about $69,000 cash remaining. There was $1,900 spent this year to finalize the bathroom, which was the final project we were waiting on. So we're asking for budget authority for the $1,900 and the expenses that were incurred this year, because that was not carried forward from prior years. And then budget authority to return those funds proportionately back to the general fund and cash in lieu based upon the proportionality from what they came. So that totals $71,164. And then $10,495,000 for the radio contract that was approved on April 25th. Consistent with that staff memo, the funding sources are the $7 million from the ARPA fund, 2.195 from the EOC 911 fund. Those are the fees for 911 operations. 800,000, which we've been accumulating for a few years in the public safety equipment replacement program, and then 500,000 from the 800 megahertz radio fund, which is a charge to departments who use the 800 megahertz radio. That would, and again, that was in that staff memo when the contract was approved. $8,700 for the dealer park repair fund. There were some unexpected repair costs for, I believe, a broken window and some landscaping materials. And then there were Legion baseball tournament costs. Those were fully reimbursed and from Legion baseball. So there's current cash balance in that fund of $426,000. We're asking for the budget authority for $8,700 there. The East Tax Increment Fund, we're asking for budget authority of $11,355. The original FY22 budget had $150,000 for developmental incentive projects. That was an estimate based upon what had been approved and what we anticipated coming forward. The actual awards paid in FY22 are listed there: the Lazy KT demo and Yellowstone Ice and Water Facility. It's a little bit higher than the original budget amount. The current cash balance in the East Tax Increment Fund is $1.1 million. And then this evening, you guys approved the contract for playground equipment at Castle Rock Park. In that staff memo, it indicated that a budget amendment would be coming forward. Here it is, for $121,000 from cash in lieu funds. These are from developers set aside for Castle Rock Park. The total funds available there is $121,188. Also tonight on your consent agenda, you approved the purchase of some, I believe it was 5 servers for the IT department. So this is the budget amendment for that. The IT fund is estimated to end fiscal year 22 with working capital balance, which is equivalent to fund balance of about $600,000. So we're asking for $150,000 to support the server purchase that was approved. And then finally, on May 9th, an initiative was brought forward to provide $200,000 from the FY22 budget to the YWCA. I believe the discussion was that this would be funded through anticipated marijuana excise tax revenue. Based upon current sales that we've seen so far this year, my estimate is that for fiscal year 22, which is January 31st through June 30, that's when we'll collect tax on those sales. Our estimated revenue will be $207,000. We should receive first payment at the latter half of this month. That'll be for the first quarter. Then our second quarter payment should arrive by August 31st. And going forward, just so you're aware, we anticipate quarterly tax payments within 60 days of the quarter end. And I believe there's representatives here from the YWCA if there are questions on that. And just to be clear, approval of this is, it is the consideration and approval or disapproval is based upon the initiative that was brought forward. So just wanted to be clear, this is your opportunity. A reminder, this is a public hearing and here to answer questions, and staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. So council, what I'll do is open it up to you to ask questions for Andy or any of the other staff members might be here impacted by this. And then we'll open it up for public hearing for anybody who might want to comment from the public on these. So Councilmember Boyette.
So Andy, don't sit down. How many more years are we obligated with a bond for the dealer park? Do you know offhand?
I believe it's 8 or 9 years. We just refinanced that not too long ago, and usually do that at the 10-year mark.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. I have questions about several different of the amendments. Let's start with the Park Construction Fund 4240. for the Centennial Park. I think you said the construction amount was $2,460,000 made up of the two different funds, but over the life of the project, that project morphed into something more, and it was actually almost $3 million, maybe a little over $3 million that actually was put into the park. There were some park water funds put into it as far as moving some water funds put into it, so it's changing the water out. There was a parking lot put in, so there was PD1 money put into that. I think you told me was $400,000 or?
I believe it was 176.
176,000, okay. And so the project itself was much more than the 2.4 million. And some of those cash in lieu funds could have been used to do the parking lot, could have been used to really anything on the project, probably. And so I guess I'd like to ask you to speak. Is this, we don't normally see money going back from a park project back into, out of the budget somehow. It's to me, I think this is the first time I remember seeing it being reversed. If this is a trend that going forward, that'd be great, so we can keep track of how much money's in PD1 and things like that. But is there a reason why this money isn't going to PD1 because PD1 money was spent?
Mayor, Councilmember Neese. So this one was a little bit unique in that Council took $2 million from the general fund and combined it with the 416 cash in lieu. So we set up a construction fund for that to make sure those funds were separate and distinct. Different from PD1, where the PD1 fund maintains those funds and they're used for projects, and if they're not used, they stay in PD1. And so to answer your question why it's different than other parks projects, well, we set up a separate park construction fund for this purpose. And we don't do that in all other parks projects. Certainly, the cash in lieu funds could have been used to offset any of the other funding sources. I think it's very accurate to say they're eligible for any park construction cost at Centennial. That could include the donations from the dog park, the PD1 funds, even the cost from the water department to make improvements there. The reason why I'm recommending putting them back here is because that's the source of the funds, and I'm not aware that there was any intent to offset PD1 or any other funding source, but only put it back to where these came from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
On the, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
On the East Tax Increment Fund, just a question on that. When the applicants receive their approval, isn't there a limit that it's up to a certain amount? So are we now approving over an amount for some of these projects? Is that what's going on here?
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, no, you're not approving more than what was approved at that meeting. What ends up happening is typically you guys will approve a project and it doesn't align conveniently with our budget process. So when that payment is made, we have to have the budget authority in that fiscal year. In fact, I believe one of those came in less than the original project amount. And I don't recall which. I think it was the Lazy KT demo, but I'm not certain. So no, you're not approving anything more than what was approved with the award. It's just a matter of timing from when those awards were made. Yellowstone Ice, for example, was in fiscal year 21. And it was just unknown at that time when it would actually be completed and paid.
Okay, Mayor, and my last question regards fund number 100 general fund for the 200,000 for the donation. So this was, Andy, you said it was an initiative that was, I guess, proposed on the 9th. I wasn't at the meeting, so I believe it was the initiative then was approved. Initiatives typically come back to the council as, to discuss and approve. And unless I missed a meeting, I don't remember being at a meeting where we actually just discussed the initiative. And here we are having a budget item to approve something that I don't think the council has met and approved yet. Is that normally what happens on initiatives? We approve a budget first and then discuss it? Or is this actually the time to take, the initiative process, we're actually discussing the item first as a separate item, and then it's combined. Can you explain it seems to me like it's not complete.
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, so I guess to be direct, this is your opportunity to discuss and debate the merits of this initiative. I believe at that May 9th meeting, there were two ideas proposed. One was to bring it back as a fiscal year 22 budget amendment. And then one was to potentially amend the FY23 budget to include this amount, given the fact we are so close to the end of the fiscal year and whether the YWCA received the contribution in June or July really made no difference. And then at a prior meeting, Councilmember Chiriki asked that it actually be brought as a fiscal year 22 amendment, and so that's why it's here. With respect to initiatives, we don't do a lot of them through budget amendment. They're typically more policy driven, so they require staff research and things like that. So you don't see a lot of these, you're right, but I think the process is complete, and this is, again, it's a public hearing, and you guys are certainly welcome to make amendments to the budget amendment.
Mayor, do you mind if I just direct the question to our legal person, just to clarify that is the process as far as initiatives and what needs to be presented to council prior to budget approval or financing of this? So, Gina, would you mind answering that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. It's my understanding that this initiative was, and Chris may need to help me with my memory, but it was my understanding that this initiative was, the direction was given to staff to proceed with this, and so this is obviously at the point of the council initiative, you can't actually approve the budget amendment, but it was just the initiative to bring it forth, and that was approved by a majority. So now it's here before you to discuss the actual merits to decide if you do want to approve that budget amendment.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. Councilmember, I'd recognize Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question, I suppose, for Director Whitaker or Andy. So about the parks construction project, is that $70,000 baked into the FY23 budget, or is that will that now increase the general fund over what the?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Rupsis, the impact here would be you would see $56,000 more in reserves in the general fund. It is not forecasted in the FY23 budget.
Right, so if I could follow up then with Director Whitaker, we had a lot of things on the Centennial Park master plan that during the construction phase we couldn't get to because it was an estimate and it was a $2.5 million project and we didn't know how much it would take. And so these are essentially our contingency funds from that project. I wonder if there was something else on that master plan that could be done, accomplish this with this $70,000, perhaps one of the smaller event, the picnic shelters, not the big one that we want, the $500,000, 100+ person type thing, but a smaller picnic shelter, some type of shade there, or other parts of the master plan that could be completed with this before we just kind of throw it back into the fold.
Councilmember Rupis, we had an internal discussion today in case that would come up, that question would come up, and we determined that the biggest bang for those dollars would be to put in part of the internal trails for the dog park. That would make it a lot more accessible for people in wheelchair. The initial quote to do the internal trails was around $117,000. I think we could come back and at least do half of them for those dollars, and I think the community would really appreciate that.
Certainly, maybe even that internal sidewalk might fit better with the original intent for those construction funds as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for Councilor Ripsis. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Shaw. Before I do, I'm just going to follow up on that point because that was going to be mine as well. I went to Centennial yesterday, and there's just a lot to be done. So if we have dollars, it seems like they should stay there. My particular concern were trees. Many trees that had been planted had died. I appreciate, though, that the Parks Department has replaced a lot in the dog park, which is an arboretum, technically. you got to use your imagination a little bit when you say arboretum and trees are 3 feet tall, but hey, we're looking down into the future, which is great. But on call it the regular park, to the west of the dog park and to the south of the parking lot, there are 19 trees that were alive in the perimeter, and 9 that are no longer there, but you can see where there once were trees. So we've lost 9 out of 28. And I would just add that to our mental list as well. And of course, there are no trees planted at all north of the parking area. So plenty of needs in Centennial Park. I don't want to second guess the Parks Board or the staff in prioritizing those things. So that's my point. Thank you. Councilmember Shaw, you had your hand up.
I did, thank you. I noticed we have Director Mary Lee Olson in the audience, so could I call you up for a minute for a couple questions about the YWCA? So in my mind, it's very clear that you're working in the public safety sphere. It's not the sphere of arresting people, but it's certainly at the back end of services for victims and victims' families. We've had a lot of conversations on council about trying to use this marijuana tax money, for causes, things that are happening in our community that are maybe related to, substance abuse or issues like that. Can you give us a little context for the YWCA, how you envision being a partner with the city in terms of solving some of these public safety issues, and really kind of what the role of the YWCA is in that? And in particular, we had the chief at our meeting, I think last week, who said, violent crime has gone down 17%, which is great news, but partner and family assaults are up 4%, which is terrible news. And that's your world. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that partnership, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Yes, we're involved with solutions for violent crime in the community. Domestic violence is a violent crime, and it's the second leading cause of violent crime in Billings. It's also second only to poverty as the leading cause of homelessness. Many people YWCA Billings serves are victims of both violence and homelessness and poverty. All of the people we serve are victims of violent crime. We are the largest and the only agency in Billings that are directly serving victims of violent crime. We're significantly invested in all of this. We're asking for money, but annually we spend $2.6 million that I raise to provide sheltering and services for victims. And I'll explain in a minute why that helps break the cycle of violent crime. We fund all of that shelter and servicing. We're not going to be coming back asking for help with that. What we are asking help for is to build a second shelter on our campus to protect victims of domestic violence. And this will increase our capacity if we're able to build it. We are building it, actually, by 300%. So rather, to put that into context, rather than having 22 beds we can offer victims, we'll have 88 beds. More importantly, rather than being limited to providing around 8,500 shelter nights a year. Shelter night is a head that's found a pillow. We will be able to provide 25,500 shelter nights a year. And that keeps people off the streets, but it also protects them from future violent crime. When we break that cycle of domestic violence, whether that's a partner abuse, elder abuse, child abuse, sexual assault, and missing and murdered Indigenous people. When we break that cycle, it reduces the pressure on the Billings Police Force. It reduces the pressure on our emergency rooms. It reduces the pressure on our city and county courts. And it also, with our housing program, where we house victims once they've cycled through the shelter process, we're able to get them permanently away from their abusers. It was interesting listening to Chief St. John last week when he was talking about incidences of domestic violence. Actually, the figure was that it's gone down, except for strangulations. The fact of the matter is that it has gone down somewhat in their reports, and I don't at all dispute their data because we rely on it, and they do an excellent job. But it had spiked 40% over the last couple of years. So if it's gone down 17 to 19%, we're still above the benchmark where we couldn't help everybody. We did not have enough room in shelter or enough services to assist them. So we really are believing that the reason that it looks like it's gone down is because of the tight housing situation. You think about it. A person who's being abused is not going to leave and go live on the street. If our shelter is full and we can't assist them, what are they going to do? So they stay with their partner and they keep taking it. Case in point, on April 15th, there was a man that caused a standoff with Billings police. He had his partner of a number of years held hostage in the house. He broke her eye socket, broke her nose. He was arrested and convicted in 2013 for abusing this woman. He got out, and over the past 9 years, he's repeatedly abused her. In 2021 alone, there were 3 situations where Billings PD were called in. She was not aware of the services available to her until her sister came to work for us. And that's the only reason I can talk about this case, because we don't usually talk about them and indicate, victim-partner relationships. But this happens repetitively, and I think we're in that cycle right now, where there's not enough service and enough shelter, so people are just staying at home and taking it.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll have a public hearing if there's anything you wanted to add to that later. Mary Lee, does that satisfy you, Councilmember Shaw?
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Councilmember Purinton, Councilmember Boyette?
Just a quick question for Mary Lee. And you don't have to provide this right now, but also we've talked a lot about fee-based, outcome-based information. So I think that's one thing that I have not seen from the YWCA is what your outcome has been for many of your clients. So I think that would be a great thing to provide.
Right, Council Member, and I appreciate so much the fact that you have a concern about that, and we do too. Our problem is that we are prohibited from tracking people unless they stay in our program. So once they leave the shelter, we have no right to ask them to continue to report to us. We're trying to figure out a way to get around that, and one of the things that has helped is when we started our housing program, which, by the way, we housed 450 victims and their families in the last 2 years. It's the most robust housing finding program, not only in the city, but in the state. But with the housing program, they're technically then still staying in our service, and we are able to track them. So based on Councilmember Purinton's suggestion that she made when we had an opportunity to talk with her about our programs, we are going to start a way to get more robust information gathering, so we'll be able to provide that. We do have data. We know how many people we've served, we know how many times they come back to us, et cetera, but we don't have exactly what you're asking for.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I see former Councilman Bill Kennedy is back there. Can you come forward, Bill?
Trying to keep Mary Lee.
Give her a rest. Give her a rest.
Mary Lee, you can take a break.
But briefly, Bill, can you tell us this $200,000 is along with other money you've collected from other agencies, coal and?
Sure. Mayor, members of the council, I've been working with Mary Lee Olson at the YWCA Billings to raise the money for the shelter. We just received another $100,000 this morning from the Bighorn County. So Bighorn County came in with $300,000. Yellowstone County has given $200,000. the Crow tribe has committed 200,000 to 300,000. So as you can see, the governmental entities feel this is a very important issue and would like to go forward, and we'd like to partner with the city of Billings also.
Can I add to that, please? So in the cost of the project is $4.25 million. That includes the construction and the furniture and fixtures. In the past 19 months, we have raised $3.9 million. So, and those are not pledges. That is money in the bank that we are able to draw on for construction loans. So there's a $350,000 gap left to close. I mean, in 19 months, we have gone from zero to almost having all that money. If the city will provide the $200,000, you can see that we only have a small amount left, and that will easily be provided by the donations that are coming in from the community. So, as Bill pointed out, the tribe, Bighorn County, Yellowstone County have contributed money. That was a part of a challenge that Bighorn County made, and we're really proud that Yellowstone County stepped up, and we're really, really pleased that we have an opportunity here in the city to meet that challenge. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, council, moving on. Any other questions for staff on the proposed budget amendments fiscal year 22 before we open up for public hearing? Don't see any, so this is a public hearing, so if anybody's in the audience who would like to comment on any of the items that are as part of item 2 for these proposed changes to fiscal year 22, please come forward. This is your opportunity. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any public comment on item number 2? Any public comment on item number 2? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Back to council. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Shaw, Tariki Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I would request that I fund 4220 and 100 is separated out for separate votes, please. 4220 is the parks and 100 is the 200,000 for the YWCA.
Okay, and yeah, 4240 Park Construction Fund change, and the dealer, or the, I'm sorry, the YW, the last one, the general fund, 1,000.
Thank you.
100. And remind me, Gina, we do have language in the ordinance about separate votes. Is this something that just exists as a matter of right, or it has to be approved by council? I bet you, Councilmember Neese, you've looked at this, haven't you? Tell us.
Yes, it doesn't need a second. It's distinct items that we're voting on.
Okay. And unless somebody has a different opinion, we'll operate on that, and we'll move ahead with the items that are not separated out. How about if we do that first? So, Councilmember Shaw, you want to pursue this further?
Yes, I move to approve the items that have not been separated.
Okay. Motion made, Councilmember Shaw, second by Councilmember Boyette. Discussion now on that motion. Motion again, it's approval with the staff recommendation, everything other than those 2 items. Any discussion before we proceed to a vote? Not seeing any. So if in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us then to, we'll just take them in order. Council, how about the Park Construction Fund, Fund 4240? This is the return of the $69,000 and change to the general fund. Councilmember Neese, this is yours. Did you want to start us off?
Yes, I liked what Councilmember Rups has said, and I think it would be appropriate actually not to approve this and let that money stay within the Centennial Park Fund. And so if there's support, I'll go ahead and make a motion to deny this amendment, reject this amendment, so that the funds can be retained in the Centennial Park Construction Fund until
Okay, let's see if we have a second, and then, okay, a very simple question before we get a second.
I wanted to make sure that legal says, should we vote not for it or just ignore it? If we ignore it, will it stay there? I mean, if we don't vote for it, I mean, I just want to find out the best way to proceed with it.
To table it or reject it?
Yeah,
would be the
Gina,
best
do we
way?
need some affirmative decision on this?
It's always best to have, make the motion in the affirmative, and then you can just deny, or you can just not approve it. But it's better to frame the motion in the affirmative, if that makes sense.
Which in this case,
You're moved to approve something.
and the affirmative in this case is to reject? Is that what, or how would you state the affirmative motion?
Okay, let me think about this. So
Can't make.
the goal is to simply remove that, you're removing let's see, which one was it? To leave it where it is. Okay. Councilmember Boyette, you have to always ask these questions.
I think the important thing personally is that there be some clear decision. And whether it's just to reject that, since we have a recommendation by staff, we'd hate to have 4 years from now that floating around without a clear decision. So yeah, just to reject it is an affirmative action, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as it's clear, I mean, obviously it's better to frame it in the move to approve something, but in this case, you're trying to reject that one. So as long as the motion is very clear, I
Okay.
think you're fine.
So we can have a motion to approve a $0 change or something like that.
Approval, the motion is to reject the proposed amendment.
Okay, very good. And is there a second? Councilmember Ripsis has a second. So if I can just ask staff, does this have any accounting ramifications we need to be concerned about? Andy, can you just tell us?
I would request that there be a budget amendment for 1,913 to cover the expenses that were used to install or finalize the installation of the restroom there. If that were approved, then the rest would remain in that fund for a future decision, likely in the FY23 budget.
So that's your affirmative motion to only approve the $1,913 for the bathroom change. Councilmember Neese and Rupsis, do you have any objection to making that your motion?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so that is the changed motion, and Councilmember Rupsis agrees with that. He nodded his head. So discussion now on that motion. Councilmember Tricky?
I do want to point out that Councilmember Neese has been hammering us about process all night long. And here we are about to allocate $69,000 without knowing exactly what Parks is going to do with it in Centennial Park. I don't object to what we're doing. I think it's the right thing to do. But I do want to say that, like, if we're going to be consistent about process, then we need to be consistent about process.
Okay. Yeah, there may be some process later to allocate how those dollars get spent. I don't know. Councilmember Joy, you haven't said anything, and back Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I was part of the process to take the money from reserves to start the Centennial Park development, which was super important. And we were at a very tight budget process at the time based on our public safety mill levy costs. And so it was seemed to be a little bit extravagant, but we did that, and it was a really great investment to move Centennial Park forward because the West End is really lacking in parks opportunity. So, but what I'm not clear at is exactly what the motion is. I understand that the $1,913 needs to be paid, but I'm still not clear exactly how you've got how the words are formed together, so that the general fund and cash in lieu remains in the construction fund, but $1,913 will be paid forward towards that amendment. Is that where we're at?
Andy,
Thank
since
you.
you're the one who has to implement, You put the motion in your words, and we'll say, yeah, that's what we meant.
Make a motion to give Andy a raise.
Yeah,
Where's your wallet?
Yeah, I think the motion could be phrased as I make a motion to amend the park construction fund budget to increase by $1,913. And that would be it.
And that's it?
Yeah.
And we understand the purpose of it. So, but is it not necessary for us to specify that those dollars go to the purpose you specified, namely the bathroom repair?
It would be unnecessary as those funds have been paid, and if it's not approved, we would have to find a different funding source for the $1,913.
Okay, so that's the only change. Councilmember Neese and Ripsis, this is your
Now I think I'm confused. We need to use $1,913 out of park construction funds that's already sitting there to pay our final expenses.
Those bills have actually already been paid because the contractors completed their work.
Okay.
So if there's no budget authority in this fund, we will have to move those expenses to another fund that has budget authority, likely PD1 or the general fund.
But we're keeping all the budget authority in this park construction fund.
There is $0 budget authority in this fund because these were created in FY19. These funds were never encumbered because the project bids were less than 2.46 million.
I'm sorry. So we have the money, we just don't have the authority to spend it yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So we need the authority to spend $1,913 out of the park construction funds to pay the final bills.
Correct.
We need the authority to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, is that consistent with your motion, Councilmembers Neese and Ripsis?
Yes.
Yes and yes. Okay, so continuing our discussion. I'd recognize Councilmember Ripsis, maybe you already covered that, and then Councilmember Gulick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I fully expect that there will be a process actually determine what that money should be used for. We're not making any decision on that tonight, so I think we're okay with the process, and I don't have the same concerns.
Okay, Councilmember Gulick, I'm sorry.
Okay, maybe I do understand now. I got confused. So that going forward is when we would give the budget authority on how that's spent at another time for the remainder, everything else besides the $1,913. So right now, we're talking about just budget authority for that amount, small amount, and then later we'll give budget authority for the rest of it. Excellent. Thank you. I understand now.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before we proceed to a vote on this item? Councilmember Neese.
Yes, I'll just mention that we're following the process that was started years ago by prior councils just to build Centennial Park. And we see there's some extra money there as Tom investigated and asked, and our Parks Director indicated there's some additional assets that can be added to that project. And so we're continuing on the process. And so I appreciate you guys asking the questions and Director coming up with some additional things that we can kind of enhance that park with. So thank you.
Okay, Council, I recommend we proceed to a vote on this item, then we'll move to the final item. Okay, so again, the motion is to add to the budget authority that $1,913 for Fund 4240 Park Construction Fund, and that's kind of it. If in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Then the last item is Councilmember Joy, the general fund, 100, the $200,000, the YW project. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you. I move we approve $200,000 in the Fund 100 to accomplish our matching grant, challenge grant for YWCA Billings Women's Shelter.
Second by Councilmember Owen. Any discussion on the motion?
May I speak to the
I'm sorry, Councilmember Joy, Owen, and Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I really appreciate the Director of the YWCA Billings coming forward and telling us the in-depth work that they have done for their fundraising and the importance of the work they do in breaking the cycle of violent crime and abuse towards women, children, partners, whoever comes into your facility. I would like to add an additional positive benefit to our community when we break that cycle of violence, the trauma to children. Children are witnesses, children are sometimes victims, but they're secondary victims in that they witness that trauma and they too are traumatized by seeing the loved person in their family, someone they identify as their own caregiver and their protector, being abused. And so whether that abuse be physical, whether it be mental, emotional, all of those are really unimportant in terms of the kinds of trauma that children experience. So please do add the positive benefit to our community when we don't have children in those situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Owen, then Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. So when this initiative was brought up, and tremendous gratitude to Councilmember Chiricky for doing it, I know there was some conversation about why this project, what makes this nonprofit special among all the nonprofits who want to do good in our community. And I think the answer to that is pretty straightforward and simple. Domestic violence is a crime, period. There has been council, I wouldn't call it consensus, but at least a majority of people who think marijuana excise taxes should be devoted to our number one priority, which is public safety. And that's exactly what this amendment does. As the chief has mentioned, as Councilmember Joy has mentioned, as we all understand, domestic violence prevention is incredibly difficult to do. It happens in private. It happens behind walls. There are generally no witnesses except for children who are incubated in this cycle of violence. And so if the victim of the crime is not able to cooperate with the prosecution, the perpetrator of the crime does not get held accountable. The bad guy doesn't go to jail. When people are dependent on their abusers for shelter, for food, for financial means, it is incredibly difficult to cooperate with prosecution. So if we want to reduce crime in this community, we have to make it absolutely easy as possible for people to cooperate with prosecution, to testify against their abuser, to ensure that that criminal is held accountable for the crime that was committed. And to be clear, this is overwhelming our community. The 2021 BPD annual report documented 986 partner family member assaults, 116 strangulations, 104 assaults on a minor, and 88 aggravated PMFAs in 2001. And we know domestic violence is underreported in the community. Our own 2020 Community Health Needs Assessment showed that 21.9% of Yellowstone County residents experience domestic violence. That's 20 to 24,000 people in our community who are being victimized every day, and many of whom need support in order to be able to establish independence and cooperate with prosecution and put an end to this crime. We are well above the national average of 14%. And so if we're going to be serious, in my opinion, about public safety as our number one priority, then we have to go after this overwhelming number of crimes that is being committed and make it so that victims can cooperate with prosecution and we can end this. The idea that we could triple the capacity of people to put away people who are doing crimes in this community is well worth $200,000 of what is right now unbudgeted dollars. These were unexpected when the FY22 budget came in. We have no purpose for them. The fiscal year ends in 2 weeks. I don't think we could do anything more important for public safety than pass this amendment. So I will support it, and I thank those who brought it forward.
Thank you very much. Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that the motion would include this money comes from the marijuana excise tax revenue, because the motion didn't say that. Yes, the money's going to come out of general fund, but I want it reimbursed from this tax, but I want that as part of the motion, I guess.
Friendly amendment accepted.
Okay.
Okay, that was the movement. Councilmember Owen agrees with that. I'm going to just ask Andy, jump up if that's a concern to you. Okay, all right, it's not a concern. He's staying put. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Neese.
I want to thank council members who have actually, had the ears to hear what was going on. Danny, you brought this forward. I think this is a worthy project for the community. I can't say it any better than what Jennifer said. I mean, we really need to focus on crime. My concern is, this is an initiative that really needs a separate vote so people can hear really what is going on, what we're doing. It would be nice to hear more people talk about it and find solutions. But I do want to focus on one thing on this, and it has to do with procedure. Again, I apologize. I missed the meetings. I don't know what the procedure is. I understand initiatives come. They voted on initiative to propose. Now, I don't recall if that initiative was actually approved. This is a budget amendment, and as we approve budget amendments, a budget amendment gives us the right to spend, but it doesn't actually approve the spending. And so I want to make sure that we did have a vote to approve the spending at the same time we are approving the budget. And if we can get clarity on that the meeting on May 9th was not just the motion to hear this, but the motion to approve spending, then I think we're in order. But I am concerned that we haven't finished this by saying we approve the spending as well. This is just a budget amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll kick it back to Chris, Andy, Gina, whoever wants to comment. This is a change to last year's budget. So Councilor Bernice is asking, is there anything else, any other trigger that needs to be pulled in order to create a good, clear record that the actual $200,000 may go out the door without further action, or will there be further action? Can you guys speak to that?
So Mayor and Council, staff, please correct me. The initiative was passed unanimously. The initiative of itself doesn't necessarily do anything other than to say, this is what you intend to do. We advertise this as an amendment to the budget. So this public hearing, which under statute has a higher bar of advertisement to hold this hearing, it was included, this $200,000 amendment was included in those advertisements for you to consider this evening. I can't see anything legally or technically that's off relative to the process you followed leading up to whether you vote for or against this amendment.
So Chris, are you saying that this budget amendment is not just a change of the budget, but authorization for staff to write a check?
Yes. Thanks, Andy.
That gives you what you need, Councilman Bernice?
As long as that's clear, yes.
Okay.
And that's proper, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Don't see anything. The only thing I'll say is somebody who very briefly was involved with prosecution of domestic abuse cases. The cooperation of the victim is everything. It determines whether a case is going to go forward, and anything that can help that process goes to the root of the problem. Okay, if in favor of the motion for approval with those stipulations, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That also then concludes item number 2, brings us to item number 3. Council, it is 7:28. If you think we can get through the next item in 2 minutes, we can proceed. Otherwise, I suggest we take a brief break, and we'll be back as close to 7:35 as possible.
think they did once.
Really? Okay. Hey, we're just a low-key sort of town. Relax. If everybody can take a seat, we'll get started. Thank you much. We left off with item number 3. Tony, would you please read item number 3?
Item number 3, public hearing and resolution approving and adopting the water resale rate and fee schedule. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This one will be really quick. You laugh.
You've jinxed us.
It should be really quick. So City Council actually already approved water and wastewater rates for fiscal years 22 and 23 last year. So tonight, all we're doing is revising the resale rate, which is Heights Water District. We have an agreement, City of Billings with County Water District of Billings Heights that specifies full cost pricing in it. We calculate the revenue requirements when we do a rate study, and it's very similar for resell, which is Heights Water District, and retail, which is everyone else, our direct customers of the city, in how we do the O&M expenses. But when you get to the capital component, that's where it changes a bit. So for our retail customers, we calculate the capital by taking our cash-funded capital projects that we have budgeted, as well as our debt service. And for the Heights Water District, that resale rate, we use depreciation and a return on a rate base. So why this is important is because for Heights Water District, they do not pay for the assets until they go into service, because that is when they're in the rate base, and that is when depreciation commences. So because we delayed the West End project, we also need to delay the previously proposed rate increase for the Heights Water District. So our current fee for Heights Water District is $2.81 per 1,000 gallons. The previously approved FY23 rate was $3.68 per 1,000 gallons. That was a 31% increase, which included the West End plant being capitalized. What we did was we updated the CIP, we updated the FY23 budget numbers, and then we updated the FY21 revenues to actuals and calculated the new rate of $2.97 per 1,000 gallons for FY23. And that is it for this one.
Thank you very much. Questions for Jennifer, after which we will open it up for public hearing. This is a public hearing. I see the president of the Heights Water District is with us as well. So questions for Jennifer. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, just a comparison, what the city residential rates, non-Heights, are going up as a percentage versus what this percentage is.
Councilmember Neese, I don't have the exact number. I think it's about 3.5% that the city rates went up.
Okay.
Previously, they've gone up substantially for the West End project. We already increased for that.
So you've already had that increase, and this increase is what, 5%?
5.7%.
5.7.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, because these rate increases are being delayed for the Heights Water District, but have started earlier for the bulk of the Billings water users, when it hits the Heights Water District, it's got to hit substantially larger. And presumably, once we've paid off a lot of those capital costs, Billings ratepayers will be able to see their rates decline, or at least not increase as much. But those will have to continue in the Heights. And they may say, well, wait a minute, we're paying a lot more than you, and we're continuing to pay them for longer than you. We all know that that's because the decision has been made not to impose these sooner by the Heights Water District. I'm just wondering, when we start getting those nasty emails, whether we've got a letter or something from the city sort of explaining these consequences and just advising the Heights Water District Board that that's their choice, but there will be consequences, so that we can remind complaining property owners in the Heights when the time comes. Do we have something like that that sort of establishes this record? If not, I would recommend that we do that. Fairly simple, but just so that we can look back at it here in a couple of years when these issues come up.
Mayor Cole, there have been a few emails back and forth, but nothing really that would be in writing to substantiate this. So we could certainly do a letter to the Heights Water District Board to point out that when the timing of the West End project is, both the plant and the reservoir, and what the effect that might have on their rates. As far as them increasing their rates early, we can't really, do anything as far as that, but we could certainly put that in writing as to
So that's
what's
just a
coming.
suggestion that what you do is up to you, Debbie, and in consultation with Chris. So just a thought. Councilor Tricky and Councilor Shaw?
As I understand it, this is because of the language of the current contract that we have with the Heights Water District, that we can only charge them for what we're actually, our actual expenses. Where are we in renegotiating that contract?
Councilmember Tariki, as far as the contract goes, what we use is called the utility basis for the resale rates, which is actually not only in the contract, but it is industry standard for those resale type customers. And then for the rest of the city, we use the cash basis, the cash needs basis. So even though it's in the contract, I'm not sure that's one of our top negotiating points, and we have not started that process to renegotiate.
Thank you. Councilor Shaw?
Thank you. This is just a quick clarification. So these rates will start July 1st, 2022. It's not a ramp up to the additional increase. That's correct?
Councilmember Shaw, correct. The 297 would start July 1st.
Thanks.
Any further discussions for Jennifer before we open up for public hearing? Don't see any, so thank you, Jennifer. This is a public hearing, so if anybody would like to comment on item number 3, please come forward. Ming.
Council people and Jennifer, thank you very much for giving us this time. The way we're going to absorb this July 1st, we've been told it's non-negotiable, and we are going to go with that. We cannot raise our rates above 5% without going to the ratepayers. So the rate is a 5.7%, so we're going to eat 0.7%. We think we're going to be able to make that up with the increase of water usage over the summertime. So we can increase our rate for 5% for now, but the negotiations are going to be a little bit difficult. I hope not, when we come down to looking at the long term, because you got to remember, we pay for our own tanks, we pay for our own building, we pay for our own structures, and those have to be in consideration later on when we do things. So what you do on a West End reservoir, or buying a skid steer or whatever, we have to buy those things as well. So please take that into consideration. But we are ready to absorb what we have for July 1st. We know that's non-negotiable, and we're aware of the rates there at this point. But thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Ming, can I just ask you a question? And I don't know whether Gina will have to comment on this too. So when you get a bill, because the West End project has been completed, and it's a big bill.
It's going to be a big bill. That's 30. We've said 30.4% increase in our rate. So if you can imagine somebody that's at a tier 1 that's paying $44, that's only on Social Security, and you're going to increase them to $65 to $70 for the water. We're going to get a lot of phone calls, and that's why we want to mediate this thing to the point where we've got to think about our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 people as well. So we're willing to do that. It's enough of this Billings Heights versus the West End City Council, whatever. We want to work together on this to make this happen. And I understand we do need the water. We need a new power. We need a plant out there right now where we're at to make sure that the whole place is adequate for everybody in the city of Billings.
So Ming, if you just clarify that 5% limit, as you understand, you'll have to put that to a vote, whether to increase 30%?
Anything above 5%, we have to increase, we have to put it to vote. So the rate increase is
that's my question. So you get a bill for 30%, you will have to put that to a vote?
That's correct.
And then, so my question for Gina is, what if the voters say, nah, no thank you? at which point I assume they will be in breach of our underlying agreement. Is that how that would roll? I guess we will cross that bridge. You know,
Not touch that. That's why I said there's going to be a lot of mediation here. Okay, that's what it comes down to.
and
But
you
we're
don't have
willing
to
to work.
comment, Gene, if you haven't looked at the agreement.
Yeah,
I'm just
I actually
highlighting the
haven't.
obvious issue.
I haven't looked at the agreement for
Okay,
some time.
that's
so.
fine. I'm just underlying the obvious question. So.
Yeah, that's very obvious for us and for the ratepayers that are paying at the heights.
Okay,
But
and I assume
thank
that's
you.
part of your bylaws or something, that limitation. So, very good. Any other public comment on this item number 3? Any other public comment on item number 3? Don't see any, so we'll close the public hearing and back to Councilmember Neese.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution approving and adopting the water resale rates and fee schedules as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Boyette. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Jennifer for the time that she took to talk to both Jennifer Owen and I. This is a complicated calculation, and I can't say I don't think we all fully understand it, but I understand it much better. And I think it's been very helpful. And I think, again, I just want to thank you, Chris, thank you for allowing the staff to really work with us and get this done. So I think, as we all have seen, these issues coming up, and I think that's something I agree. I would like to see us move forward on negotiating that contract. These things are going to cause issues down the road for all the ratepayers in the Heights, and I think the best thing to do would be for the Heights Water Board to kind of contact the city and start that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and of course, I will support the motion. Based on some of the comments here from the president, it sounds as though there are some very difficult conversations that are going to have to be had. And I think one of the things that we as council should help really appreciate in our staff is that they always have that eye to our sustainability. And that's why we've made this investment. It's about sustainability. It's about resilience. For our city, and I think the Heights Water District will have to really face that issue of the sustainability of their system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion is for approval of item number 3. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Motion again for approval consistent with the recommendation. If in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, say nay. Motion passed unanimously. That concludes item number 3. Item number 4. Tony, would you read item number 4?
Public hearing and resolution establishing collection, disposal, and landfill fees for FY 2023. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval, or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Back to Jennifer.
Thank you. So the solid waste rates have to be approved annually by resolution. So what's before you here tonight are the FY 23 proposed fees for both collection and landfill. We did include discussion during our budget presentation in May about our primary rate increase drivers, so I'm just going to summarize them real quickly tonight. Inflation, of course, is the big one, hitting all areas. And as far as our O&M is concerned, the two biggest hits for inflation are to fuel and to containers. So we had to add $570,000 to our budget for fuel. That's an add, not the total budget. And then the container budget also we had to increase by $300,000 just for price increases that we're seeing. We also requested in our budget 2 collections workers, greatly needed right now, and that's just to maintain service levels. And then we are recommending basically doubling our litter control budget for FY 23, which would buy additional windscreens and paper pickers at the landfill. And then, of course, the last driver is capital. We do have a large capital budget. It's about $13.3 million for FY 23, with about 3/4 of that being investments at the landfill. We are recommending a 5.3% increase in both the residential and commercial collection fees. For the monthly residential fee, this is currently $11.82. It would be a 63-cent increase, bringing that to $12.45. And then we're also recommending a 6.3% increase in our roll-off fees. The roll-off fee is currently $174. That would increase by $11 to $185. Then there's just a couple other items on the collection side that we are recommending changes to. Like we discussed before, everything else would come with the pay-as-you-throw program if that's adopted at a later time. But we did want to revise the carryout fee. Right now, it is double the monthly residential fee for that. And we are recommending changing it to be the same as the monthly residential fee, as long as there's documented medical necessity with that. And then the other item is in our bulky item pickup fee. So right now, you could basically empty your entire house, put it on the curb, and we'll pick it up for 27 bucks. So we would like to change that so that it's $50 for the first 5 items, $100 for 6 to 10 items, and then really filling the truck at greater than 10 items for $150 to bring that in line with cost of services. For landfill fees, we're recommending a 6.8% increase, and then we are also eliminating or proposing to eliminate the 6% surcharge on out-of-state refuse, and then just incorporate that into our out-of-state rate at this time to avoid a extra calculation that's unnecessary. So the City of Billings fee right now is $22 per ton. That would increase by $1.50 to $23.50. And then the outside City of Billings fee is 50% higher than the city fee, and out-of-state is double the city fee. So in the last year, about 62% of our refuse has come from within the City of Billings, 24% from Yellowstone County, 11% from other counties in Montana, and then 3%, it's actually not quite 3%, from Wyoming. I will just want to note, 2 tough guys called me. That's 2 tough guys services, not 2 actual tough guys. So I just saw a look on a couple of your faces. So we have a contract with two entities from Wyoming. One is 2 Tough Guys Services, one is the City of Powell. So the owner of 2 Tough Guys Services called wanting to strike a deal, kind of proposed holding the rates where they were for out of state and kind of locking them into a 5-year deal because they have some capital investments they need to do. I told them I would not recommend that to council, but I would note it for council in case you wanted to include that in your decision making. The other thing to note here is the City of Powell is in discussions with the landfill in Wyoming that's just south of Cody. And they're really close to making a deal, I think, locking in the rate there for about 65 bucks per ton. And for them, that's a better deal than paying $47 and transportation costs to get it here. So we will probably lose Powell in the next month or 2. And then on this slide at the top, it shows monthly residential collection fees. Billings is $12.45, the lowest there. Next closest is Great Falls at $13.65, Kalispell at $15.98, and Bozeman at $26.73. So landfill fees per ton are shown at the bottom, that comparison. City of Billings is still the lowest of any city we survey at $23.50. Next closest is Bozeman at $27. Those non-city and out-of-state fees for Billings are creeping up there at this point, but they're still well below Helena and those Wyoming landfills. We are expecting an overall increase in revenues from these proposed fee increases of $1,050,000. This is overall a 6% rate increase for the solid waste fund. And lastly, talk about FOG. We've talked about it before, but never in a solid waste presentation because it has to do with wastewater. But we talked about coming up with a solution of what to do with FOG to give people a place to take it and keep it out of our wastewater system. So our solution is actually to build a disposal area at the landfill. And this is going to save millions of dollars in capital expenditures. But we just need to establish a rate at the landfill to cover that cost of services. So the recommended fee for that is for the city of Billings, $60 per 1,000 gallons. And then it would go up proportionately for out of Billings and out of state fees. We did not include this in the proposed resolution or in the council memo that went out, as it kind of came to fruition after the deadline for that. So we are asking you tonight to amend that proposed resolution to include these fog fees. And that is it. I'm here for questions.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, on just your last point there about the fog fees, have you given us proposed language for the resolution to make that change, or is it clear, or are we kind of writing in the dark here on the details of that?
I did not give you proposed language. It would be to approve the resolution amended with fog fees of $60 for City of Billings, $90, $120.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the draft resolution on page 2 of our packet does not address that issue at this point at all.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Lots of questions. Councilmembers Gulick, Owen, Joy, Perrington.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, I had questions on the fats, oil, and grease. More curiosity, so I'll try to keep it brief. But is the city doing collection with that as well then? And the second question, well, I'll let you answer that first, if I may.
Mayor, Councilmember Gulick, no, it would not be collection of fog. It would be a place for haulers to come and dispose of it, rather than take it to the wastewater, and it causes all kinds of problems there. What it will do, though, is allow our environmental group to start doing more enforcement. It's been pretty hard to do enforcement when they don't have any place to take it, but now they can start that.
Right, great, thank you. And yeah, I applaud the City Public Works for taking the initiative to recognizing a solution to that. So I appreciate that. And then secondarily, well, I'm sure you're covering the expense of just there's what's in particular environmental requirements for this thing. And is it landfilled with the rest of our refuse, and does it long-term contribute to the methane gas that we can recover?
Councilmember Gulick, I don't have those answers. I think we can send them to you later. Obviously, it uses up space at our landfill. As addition to, there's just very minor construction costs for these. So we are covering our cost of services, including that environmental portion of it as well in these costs. But we can kind of research the methane issue and kind of see if they have any numbers yet on how much it would increase.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Owen Choi.
Jennifer, there's about $2 million proposed in the fiscal year 23 budget to improve fog handling in the system. I assume that's separate and apart from these fees, which would be used to build some kind of facility at the landfill. Am I understanding correctly?
Councilmember Owen, that $2 million is in the wastewater system and will not be used at this point. When we were studying, and we've had a consultant look at different options, it was going to be beyond that $2 million. But that project has gone away with this.
So we need to fix that in the budget before we approve it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. But then this will have some sort of facility or spot at the landfill where it can be disposed of.
Yes. So Lewis and Clark County does it right now. And so what you're looking at with those pictures there, that's basically what it is. They build a hole and they cover it up.
Fancy.
Drive over that hole.
Thank you.
And boy, is it popular with the local dogs. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Some of my questions have already been asked, but I was just going to say, could you explain the photograph with what might be the fat in the system? And a lot of times when we have utilities, we're talking about a cost, a return on our investment with capital, but what are our maintenance, what are the big issues? If we were to explain this to a constituent, what are the issues that we're solving with this, and what does the fog do to our infrastructure? Thank you.
So thank you, Councilmember Joy. That picture down at the bottom there, that shows fats, oils, and grease in a pipe, and it just keeps building like that. So eventually, it causes issues with pipe breaks. It causes issues with backflows. So the maintenance is all in our distribution and collection division, where they're out there fixing those pipes and fixing those backups. Also, of course, costing property owners money with those backups.
Thank you, Councilmember Purinton and Boyette.
I'll just continue along this vein right now, because I have other questions about your presentation. So there are containers at different restaurants, wherever, facilities where they have these. So Public Works will pick up the, whatever is collected in those containers and take it to something like this.
So, Councilmember Purinton, those grease traps that they have at each restaurant, no, it's up to them to contract with a hauler to dispose of that, and then that hauler would bring it to the landfill. So we will not actually be collecting this ourselves.
Okay. So, so the fees that you're attaching to this, I guess what I'm saying, I don't know what is the basis for those fees to be set at that rate.
Councilmember Purinton, at this point, it was our best guess, as we have not done this yet. So there's not a whole lot of cost to digging the holes. There is cost at the landfill to filling up that airspace. We just don't know how much and how quickly we might use for the landfill. We also have environmental monitoring costs, and then it includes the costs of our landfill workers that have to go out and monitor this and cover each layer, because it will just build up, and they'll cover each layer until they go to the next and build a new cell.
Go ahead.
So I'm still confused as to your best guess. So it could be way under budget for what these fees are, or it could be just right, or it could be over. So I'm trying to figure out a way in my mind to figure out why we should approve this at this moment. I don't know if there's more study that needs to be done, or I know you do a lot of rate comparisons with other communities. I'm kind of at a loss right here.
Councilmember Purinton, so we've talked to Lewis and Clark County about what it takes at their landfill. So we're just assuming those same types of things going into ours and using our own labor rates and our own equipment rates to calculate the cost. I say it's our best guess, but it's not going to be hugely off either way. Right now, to bring it to the wastewater plant, we have a sewage rate, so it's a septage rate, and they charge the same septage rate for fog at the wastewater plant, and we're charging $61.12 right now. So really similar to what it would be if they went to wastewater.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyette. Then I've got a question. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. Just one thing that's always bothered me is when I was a young man, I was working for a contractor, and he was telling me to go to the dump, the waste, the landfill. He just had to say every time they asked a question, say city, because then I didn't know what that meant. Well, now I do. How do you anticipate monitoring, to verify that all these people are the city or the county?
Councilmember Boyette, we have been having lots of internal discussions about that. Our method of saying city county is not going to work going forward. The fee disparity between city and, say, out of state is so big right now that why wouldn't you say city? So we have been talking about different things like showing a utility bill, issuing permits to all city residents, doing things like that. We just don't have a final answer yet.
Jennifer, my question was that $200,000 bill for Councilmember Boyette with interest. Are you sure that's calculated correctly? Goes back a few years. My question is on the not charging for the carryout service if there is a piece of paper that establishes the medical necessity. Will that authorization require some sort of reapproval or expire, lest somebody get it when they're 18 and still be using it when they're 96? Can you just kind of walk us through that process? And then kind of generally the chart that shows the variance of costs, residential collection costs. Billings is so low relative to, in comparison to some of those Wyoming landfills. It was a multiplied 400%. What accounts for that huge difference?
Mayor Cole, so first on the carryout question, we don't 100% have the internal process yet, but what we've talked about is it would be attached to our billing account, right? So anytime that account turns over, they would know to make sure that they receive new medical documentation if it was a carryout customer. I don't know if we would make people renew year by year if there's enough people really that have a medical necessity one year and don't the next. It usually kind of continues. So I'm not sure that we would take the time, but we haven't worked that all out yet. Okay. And then on the rates, a lot of our fees are one way that we keep our fees low is because we do both the collections and the landfill. We own the landfill and we do the collections, and that helps keep all of our rates low. Secondly, you know, some places like Bozeman, it might include the recycling in it. Billings, though, includes not only your black barrel, but it includes your green barrel and really any extra waste you want to put out there about once a month right now, too. I did talk to the city administrator from Powell today about his discussions down there, and you know, he said that it's really a matter of lack of land in Wyoming for landfills, and that's what's driving their costs up there, or down there, I should say. And then for collections for Powell, he said that they are right now at $31, and they are going to $36 this year because of those transportation costs. But they are a lot smaller. We do have economies of scale here in Billings where, you know, close pickups helps. In Bozeman, they do allow alternatives for other carriers to come in and pick up within the city. So I think that makes costs go up because you have skipped stops in between. So you're losing some efficiencies there.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Any further questions before we open up for public hearing? Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. I share your concern about the carryouts as far as being maybe misused and with the renewal. So I would hope that staff monitors that well. If you see a spike in that they kind of review that. But and I actually thought this question would be asked by Councilmember Gulick, so I'll ask it. The Public Works is known to be really innovative. I mean, we're producing fertilizer. We have methane gas out of our things, and so. I just did a quick Google search as far as fats, oils, and grease, and it's a source of biofuel. And so is there any, if we're now, I can understand where a restaurant, maybe small collectors, not been able to utilize this for anything. But now that we're going to be collecting it, and we could be a source of having massive amounts of this, and maybe not massive, but some larger amounts that could be actually now utilized to either resell or produce into some type of, have you guys considered or looked into that? Because that way you're not using up the landfill. You're actually storing it to be either resold or processed somewhere else.
Councilmember Neese, yes, our consultants have looked at that. The return on investment was so far out, and the millions of dollars in construction we need was so high that this was definitely the better option as far as low cost for Billings.
And maybe I'm not thinking not us producing the biodiesel, but just storage to sell, and someone else picks it up and goes to their massive biodiesel plant or something. Anyway, that's just a thought. I would hope that if that opportunity comes up, because right now diesel prices are very high. Mayor, if you don't mind, I have another question.
Go ahead.
I just want to address what you said about the guessing rates. I don't think you guessed. I think you did some research and you actually looked at what some of the organizations were doing. I would feel comfortable that you would bring it back to us if you find that, we're undercharging way too much and we need to change the rates, even mid-year, if that would be needed. Is that correct?
Councilmember Neese, yes, if we're way off in what we're doing, and we probably will not start until September of October of this year, but we would come back to you with a rate change.
Okay, Mayor, my one last question is, you mentioned, this is the new rates are we're adding some rates to the bulk carryout or kind of clarifying that, which I agree. I mean, you don't want to throw your whole house out for $27, but what's considered bulk? I think in our extras, I think it's defined as anything greater than 3 cubic yards. Is that what you're considering? Anything over 3 cubic yards is now classified as bulk?
Councilmember Neese, correct. So that would be, a lot of people do the kitchen remodeling and put the cabinets out on the curb, or put, sofas out on the curb, a recliner, anything like that would go in our bulk truck.
But if they were to break it down into 3 cubic yards, then they would pick it up on the as long as it's under, 1,500 pounds, they would, no, that's actually at the landfill. That's
Right.
taking it, yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, Council, we're ready for our public hearing on this item? Let's do that. If you got other questions, or we can follow up. But let's open it for public comment. This is item number 4, resolution establishing collection disposal landfill fees. Any public comment? Councilor Ewald.
Frankie Ewald, 2131 Phoebe. Mayor and council, I didn't hear anything mentioned about dislike for extra funds. Back in 2019, I made a motion on city council that we charge 10% more for anybody outside the city on tonnage. And that got charged that year. And then the next year, it was still down fairly low and below the middle of the group that's in the graph up there. And so council passed, I made another motion, council passed that for adding on another 10%. And if you do the math right, if it's 10% one year and you add 10% the second year, that makes it actually 21% because it compounds that first 10%. So then staff must have interpreted it wrong because they only charged 10% one year, 10% the next year, and last year, as far as I know, they didn't charge anything. So for a city that's always looking for money, I'm wondering what's going on, and so I think you probably should reinstitute that 20%. I'd forego the 1%, but I think we need to get that 20% back in, and it's supposed to stay in a special fund for capital improvements at the landfill, so that they just can't arbitrarily use it for anything. It needs to be kept in there for capital improvements. And if my figures were right and what's going on, you would probably be collecting between $800,000 and $1 million a year on that 20%. And the only time it would go up is if staff would increase landfill fees. Then whatever that increase is, it'd be 20% of that would be the only increase. Otherwise, it just remains at 20%. So and I think there was an initiative voted and passed in December to do just that, but I didn't hear anybody mention anything about that. So it's money laying there, and it's not city money. So I hope you get it worked back into the program. Thank you.
Thank you. In a minute, we'll ask for staff to remind us kind of where we're at on how these rate changes jive or don't jive with those previous decisions, I guess. Any other public comment on item number 4? Any other public comment? Don't see any, so we'll close the public hearing on item number 4. We'll come back to staff. I'll recognize Councilmember Purington, I'll recognize Councilmember Purington after I just asked staff to comment on Councilmember Ewald's history on, those past 2 10% increases and segregating the dollars for landfill improvements. How does this fit or not fit?
Mayor, council, so previous to the 2 extra 10% rate increases, the the out of Billings rates and the out-of-state rates were incrementally higher than Billings at that time, just not as high. So they went up another 10% one year, per council member Ewald's motion, and then another 10% the following year. We did, calculate those costs as we listened to those motions and went back and listened to those motions. I do understand the intent may have been different than what was maybe specified during that council meeting. But I will tell you, all of it goes into the solid waste fund and only is spent on solid waste. And so if we go back to that, the capital numbers, we always have more in solid waste than, in the landfill side than we would be collecting in that. So if council desires us to actually set up a separate fund and separate this money, I think we would need a defined purpose as to when we can use it and what you want that used for, because we do have plenty of landfill projects every year to spend those extra dollars on. The reason we didn't have that extra 10% for the last 2 years is because then last year we proposed, let's just be intentional about this. Let's set the out-of-city rates at 50% higher than Billings, and let's set the out-of-state rates as double what Billings pays, and be intentional instead of these arbitrary, 10% rate increases each year. So that's what we've done. We can do, a separate fund if you desire. Just keep in mind that it just does kind of lock you down as far as your rates go in the future if we kept segregating that money and never were spending it at the landfill, because remember, the landfill does subsidize collections right now.
Okay, so if I can paraphrase that, if I understand it, the 10%, the two 10% increases were instituted. Staff wants to move away from continuing that. These are significantly higher, so we've kind of accomplished Councilmember Ewald's original goal, which was to increase them substantially. But staff does not want to segregate them in a separate capital improvement account unless there's a very good reason and the rules are defined for how to tap those dollars, I guess. So, okay. Council, I said a recommendation, Councilmember Purinton, Councilmember Boyette.
Well, and I guess going back to that is that with the 10%, those were council-approved initiatives that I think that we move forward. And I don't truly remember the discussion that we were replacing that with your increases, what staff was recommending. I don't remember that was, well, we're not going to do that, but we're going to do this. Did that come across in a council meeting that we approved that?
Councilmember Purinton, yes. Last year when we approved solid waste rates, and keep in mind, the 10% rate increase from the first year stayed there. And then it was another 10% on top of that. So those rate increases didn't go away. We just brought forward a more intentional fee. Each year it was, just brought up at council. Yellowstone County didn't have notice, our haulers didn't have notice. So we just wanted to be, we do have customers that are affected by those rate increases. So to be more intentional about what we're doing and to be able to set those rates at rates where council going forward knows exactly how much more they are than the city of Billings rate, we said 50%. So that did not back off of that 10% and the 10% from the year before, but we did make that known last year when the rates were voted on.
Okay. One of the other things that I wanted to go back to on this particular, the rate increase for the drivers, is that at this point, because I don't know if this is part of what we're going to be working with when we approve the budget, it seems like we're kind of doing things, we're taking public works in just this section of public works, and we're approving this for the budget for next year. So one of them was, in order to maintain your service levels, you want to add 2 more collection workers And it's my understanding right now that you don't have the collection workers that are already allocated for the current budget or what your staffing levels would be. Is that true?
Councilmember Purrington, I believe right now we have 4, maybe 5 openings. So we are not full. But even with that, we are not sure how we're going to get through the summer. We have to let people have vacation or morale goes down. People are leaving anyways for better paying jobs. We can't be canceling vacations. So we need people to cover, and we just don't have that right now. So the 2 additional workers is truly just to maintain what we have. It's not to expand any type of services. It's just needed to get us by to maintain what we have, as well as filling our existing vacancies. We've been borrowing from DNC. We've been borrowing from streets to just backfill some of the issues in solid waste. Not to say that DNC and streets didn't have work to do, but we have to pick up garbage. I mean, we have to be a city that picks up garbage, so we can't do that. We just are doing less work in these other divisions and backfilling with those employees. You did mention a rate or a wage increase for Public Works, or did I hear that right? Because we haven't done a wage increase for our drivers.
I thought that they had increased the wages.
So Councilmember Purrington, we are advertising at step 3 of our 7-step scale right now, because we can't hire anybody in a step 1 or 2 anymore. But it's not a rate increase as far as our wage scale. That hasn't changed.
And so also increasing the litter control for $100,000. I know that whenever Public Works had their presentation, there were a couple of suggestions of maybe some sort of capital improvement at the landfill around the pods or something that could block some of the blowing, that we could use some of the Yellowstone County inmates for some of that work, and that would not be a charge to us. In fact, I think they have to pay for it. And then I thought with this big, the facility that we have, that was also supposed to kind of control some of that loose litter out there.
Councilmember Purrington, yes, when that building is in use, it is supposed to help substantially with that litter from blowing. Even then, we will have, that bottom picture, the wind just blows out there. When it's windy, that trash goes everywhere. So the windscreens is what we're talking about for those capital items, to build more windscreens around the landfill for blocking that. We have checked into using inmates. Turns out that Alternatives runs the program. And they think it will work. So we think we can help offset some of the costs with using that program too.
Just one final thing, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll make that the last one, move on.
All right, thank you. I think that this 10%, and now we're at 50%, I'm sorry, I am just not following it. And I would really like to see something that follows what we're doing, and I guess what we've done, and make sure that it is in, I guess, moving forward, that we are taking those steps to make sure that the people from out of city, out of state are bearing that burden. Because I think I'd prefer them to bear the burden that are residents.
Councilmember Purrington, which is exactly why I told the owner of Two Tough Guy Services that I could not recommend anything to council, that it wouldn't be approved. But I can tell you FY19, staff recommended a 5% rate increase for the landfill for all fees across the board. Council approved a 15% rate increase for out of city and out of state. The next year it was exactly the same, 5% recommended, 15% approved. Last year, I don't recall the exact percentage amount, but it was to bring it up in line with that 50% and 100% number. So it was still a hefty amount last year too. I just don't recall the exact percentage.
Okay, Councilmember Boyette, you got your hand up. Councilmember Joy. You're done? Okay, Councilmember Joy.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve resolution establishing collection, disposal, and landfill fees for FY 2023 as recommended by staff, including fog fees of $60, $90, and $120.
Second. Councilmember Tricky, I saw your hand up. Was that your intention to second that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And discussion now on the motion. Do we have our public hearing? We did have a public hearing, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. I think we did.
Yes, we did.
Okay, all right. Right. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm comfortable with the rates, the out-of-state rates being 20% higher. Actually, they're higher than that. And so I think it's more consistent, it's predictable for people. And so I agree with that. The only question I did have, I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm asking a question during this, but it wasn't addressed. I didn't quite get clear on the money that the 10% that was collected, that was set aside. Did that ever get to council for approval to spend? Has that been spent, or is it still sitting there waiting for council to approve? And do we have to do anything about that?
Councilmember Neese, we have confusion on that too among staff. It's sitting in the landfill fund. We don't know if we can spend it on landfill capital. I don't think that's ever really been specified as to can we spend it on our current landfill capital? Are we saving it up? Should we keep it there? So we don't have clear direction on that.
Well, again, I'm going to support this motion, but I would ask the staff bring that issue back to us so we can discuss it and decide what to do with that, so that can help clear up and free up those funds for use.
Okay.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. Again, the motion is for approval, consistent with staff recommendation, and that also includes the $60 fat, oil, and grease special charge. If the motion is clear, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item number 4. Item number 5, back to Jennifer, our further solid waste disposal ordinance changes.
Sorry, is the clerk read the item?
In the essence
Oh,
of time, I'll let it
Thank you.
go.
Thank you very much. Yes, Tony, please read item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing and first reading ordinance amending Billings, Montana City Code, Article 21-200, solid waste collection and disposal. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
So 2 slides, so I don't know why that loaded so slow, but.
Quite a picture you got there.
But they're doozies.
So this item tonight is the first reading to amend Billings, Montana City Code, Article 21-200, which covers solid waste collection and disposal. As we just discussed in the last item, we are asking to revise the carryout fee, and that is actually specified in our ordinance to be 100% more than the monthly residential fee. So that would change to be the same as the residential fee as long as we have that documentation of medical necessity. We do, however, have some areas of town, particularly some townhomes that were constructed in a way in which we cannot pick up their garbage without carrying it out. So those areas would continue at that double the monthly fee rate unless those occupants could document that medical necessity. And then while we were at making this ordinance change. We just cleaned up some obsolete language that was in it and then added a definition of yard waste because that never was included in the ordinance. I know there was an email from Councilmember Neese and I responded today. I'm not sure which of those amendments may be amendments to the proposed amendment that you may want to make, so I'll just defer to you on that. And that is it for this.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese, you did have some correspondence. Would you just like to tell us if, well, we need to have a public hearing.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, I would say if we have a public hearing, once we make the motion to approve, then we can amend it.
Okay. Is there any, we'll open for a public hearing, item number 5. Is there anybody who would like to comment on item number 5, proposed changes to solid waste ordinance? Any public comment on item number 5? None, so we'll close our public hearing. Councilmember Neese, you did have that correspondence with staff, so would you like to tell us, was there anything that emerged out of that you'd like to pursue?
Well, I guess what I'll do is I'll make the motion to approve, and then I'll amend the motion. That way we can take one at a time.
However you'd like to proceed.
Okay, having, we're on 5, correct? Okay, having conducted a public hearing, consider written, spoken public testimony, I move to approve and amend the Billings, Montana Code, Article 21-200 on the first reading as recommended by staff.
Okay, and second by Councilmember Gulick. So that's the underlying staff recommendation. Back to Councilmember Neese, you had something you wanted to change.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend this. In the email I sent out, if you have it, there was under the section 21-204 regarding the same size of residential containers. My recommendation was to kind of change, not to try to put into ordinance the frequency. And so I put a couple of things out there, and Jennifer's response was maybe that she would suggest the good change would be, I guess if you look at my email, it would change that ordinance to and be picked up per approved published schedule or frequency. Rather.
And Councilmember Neese, I thought I heard you say
209. Yeah, section 21-209.
And so.
The second to last sentence of that.
Yep. And so instead of saying and will be picked up monthly, it would say and will be picked up, and say that slowly.
Picked up per approved published schedule or frequency.
Okay. So that's the first proposed amendment. And you made a motion to that effect, I believe.
I made the motion to that effect.
Is there a second? Councilmember Boyette makes the second on the proposed amendment. Jennifer, your email said that you did not have any objection to that. Is that still your position? You nod your head, so that's staff's position on that. Any discussion before we go to a vote? No, we'll proceed to a vote. This is only on the amendment to add it to the underlying message, to add that language or change that language. If you're in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Well, is there anything further, Councilmember Neese?
My next proposed amendment is going to be to the last sentence. The last sentence indicates that refuse placed in receptacles not meeting these specifications may or may not be collected at the option of the city. That's really a non-policy. I mean, we're saying we may or may not, and it'll lead the city into issues where, well, you picked up this guy and you didn't pick up mine, and I think that we need to really clean that up. My recommendation was to change it to, again, if you saw the language I had sent out, it will not be collected, and then any continued violation could lead to a code violation. Any additional pickup charges would apply if the city needs to return or provide alternate collection service. So it's notifying that this needs to be done. That's our policy. That's what we're asking to do. It needs to be done. And then if they continue to violate, code enforcement would have to get involved. And then because we wouldn't be picking up trash because it's not being done correctly, and then they would have to, code enforcement would have to get out there and do that. So that would be my recommended motion. I believe, just to let you know, Jennifer said there's additional things that have to be changed later on if we go to the pay to throw. I think we should fix it now, and that's why I'm making the motion.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Councilmember Boyette. I'm going to just start to ask Jennifer to comment specifically, just as the original language may or may have been too loose to say will without any exception. Is that too narrow? That there's a very good excuse and we don't have any choice in the matter.
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, my preference would be just to strike that sentence for now, that last sentence, rather than actually use code enforcement, because to use code enforcement, that requires our drivers to do extra work to decide if we are going to pick it up, if we're not, and then document that and get it back to the office. And we just are strapped right now for people. We don't have the people to really track that. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've angered people in the last year about solid waste, so we're trying to lay low and not make any big changes at this point.
Okay, so your recommendation was not to change that language at this time, is that right?
Or to strike the last sentence where that.
Simply strike the last sentence.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Neese, Boyette, Council, we have a motion to amend on the table. Discussion now on that motion. Councilmember Neese?
Question to legal on this. If will, you're right, Mayor, will is a very strong word. Legal, if there's something that would lighten this up a little bit to really get the idea across that the city really wants to adhere to these policies, but yet doesn't tie us to, we don't collect it, that we would be in some kind of violation of the ordinance by collecting it if there was just a minor infraction. Is there better language instead of will?
Mayor, Council, and Councilmember Neese, I think I would need to sit down with Jennifer to talk about the intent. I can't come up with language just right now exactly. I'm not exactly sure what it is you're looking for, so I would need to, I'm just not able to come up with some language on the fly right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the proposed amendment. Councilman Roupsis, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a substitute motion to strike the last sentence in section 21-209 per Jennifer's preference.
I'll support that.
Okay, Councilmember Neese seconds that. So I suggest we just proceed to a vote on that. If in favor of that proposed motion to strike the last sentence, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Anything further, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. The third was in section 21-11, again, preparation for refuse of collection. One of the things that, my motion is going to be to add to this section that all, initially a motion, or was going to make a motion that all city residential containers must keep 4 feet clearance around containers, because I've heard a lot of that from Public Works. They said they need a lot of clearance around that. From what I understand, that's not 4 feet is maybe not be, possible in some situations. And so I would like to make a motion to add all city provided residential containers are to be kept clear around the container, and the recommended distance is, and I would rely on the Public Works to put a number in there as far as feet clearance around the container for pickup. So what would be their best recommendation, or maybe even a minimal in there, so that we know that the truck drivers can get in there, get the trash, can get out, and it's not slowing the process down.
And just clarify which subsection in 211?
21-211, it would be an added section.
A new
added line,
D.
sentence, or added line D. You could add it D if you want.
Well, let's be clear. It's your motion. Where would you like it?
D.
D. A new D.
A new D.
New D as in dog. Okay. Thank you. The question was to Jennifer. Does Public Works have a recommendation for the recommended distance? Was the proposed language not mandatory, but recommended?
Mayor Cole, our recommended is still 4 feet. That's what the clearance is needed for the truck to get in there.
Okay, so the language, and we'll ask Councilmember Neese to repeat it, but would be to remind people they need to have adequate space, and that recommended distance is 4 feet. Do you want to be, do you have the exact language that you can repeat there, Councilmember?
Yes, all city-provided residential containers are to keep the area clear around the container. The recommended distance, or I'm sorry, the recommended distance is, the recommended clearance is 4 feet around the container.
Thank you. Jennifer, did you have any opposition to that proposal? Okay, and we had a motion. Did we have a second to it? Councilmember Purington. Okay, discussion now on the proposed amendment. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question for Jennifer. Would this run afoul of people just putting their garbage container up against the curb? So most people who are having to bring their containers out to the front of their house, they just put them at the curb. Sometimes it's usually not in the driveway, but they're just up against the curb and the truck comes by and so are we making it too cumbersome by saying this 4 feet when people who do it out front, they wouldn't, 4 feet in would be out in the past, the curb, out into the edge where people are parking, if that's a parking space? Thank you.
Councilmember Joy, so on the curb is fine. That's not the issue. It's anything beside the can. So it would be a mailbox, but a lot of it is in the alleys, maybe too close to a fence is where people are putting it. So that's where that 4 feet recommendation comes in. But usually when it's curb pickup, people are just putting it right out on their sidewalk there, and that's fine.
Okay, Councilor Rupsis.
Jennifer, do you see any reason this has to be written in city code?
Councilmember Rips says, no, I don't think it's necessary.
Thank
I'm
you.
not opposed to it.
Okay, further discussion. We'll proceed to a vote. Is the nature of the motion clear? Okay, if in favor of the motion, we'll have a show of hands. Please raise your hand. Voting in favor, council members Neese, Owen, Cole, Tidswell, Purington, and Boyette. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Council members Shaw, Gulick, Joy, Chiriki, and Rupsis. So that passed 6-5, right? So, okay, so that's been added. We are now ready to proceed to a vote on the amended ordinance, proposed amended ordinance. Any discussion, further discussion necessary? If not, you've heard various amendments. If in favor of the now amended ordinance, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That concludes item number 5. Brings us to item number 6. Tony, would you read item number 6?
Item number 6, public hearing and resolution for a street name change from Monad Road to Rocky Vista Way, located between Shiloh Road and 44th Street West. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Our presenter is, gee, what a surprise. Long time no see, Jennifer DeRay. Wear many hats for somebody who doesn't wear any hats, but go ahead.
Happily, this will be the last time you see me tonight. So this item before you is a street name change. And Rocky Vista University is planning to build a medical campus that's adjacent to Monad Road and west of Shiloh. So Dr. David Park, on behalf of the university, requested a street name change for that section from Shiloh Road to 44th Street. So renaming Monad for that blue section shown on the map to Rocky Vista Way. Streets are allowed to be renamed by council in a resolution after holding a public hearing. So currently, Rocky Vista is the only property owner in that section that is addressed to Monad there and affected by the name change. There are 3 other parcels that are undeveloped now and may be addressed from the road in the future. We, or actually the university checked with stakeholders in the area and no one opposed the initiative. Most were in support of it, and then one entity did neither support nor oppose the name change there. So this isn't a great map, but what this shows is kind of what the plan is for Monad Road. So the city does not actually have anything in its plans to extend Monad Road right now past 44th Street. So there are, however, some complications. If you look on that far west side, that blue oval, that is a portion of road that's already built, that's already called Monad in the county. And then there's another section in the county that is platted to be Monad, and that's that rectangular section there in green. And then years and years ago, the county platted a road, Georgina, that's shown there. And that road right there, I mean, it looks on this map like it's completely in alignment with Monad, but just to tell you, this map is a little skewed, so it's actually south of that Monad alignment. And so then later, when the adjacent area was platted, the city continued the name Georgina. So there's a number of kind of names going through here. If you approve this name change tonight, it would be Rocky Vista Way from Shiloh to 44th Street West. And at that point, Monad does end and turn south onto 44th Street there. Not sure if that was confusing enough, but that was all I had for the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And I assume that the ones farthest to the west would be in the 80s, 70s and 80s, it looks like?
It's 80th Street West on that far side, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Park is with us if we have questions of him. So questions for Jennifer, and then we'll open up for public hearing. Councilmember Tricky?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Having lived in New York, there are lots of streets, I've seen a lot of streets that are like double named. When we label this street, are we going to use two street names on it or just the one? So are we going to, for that block, it will not be labeled Monad, it'll just be labeled Rocky Vista?
Councilmember Tricky, that's correct. It would just change one name, it would be Rocky Vista Way, that those streets.
And that's our current policy for how we're doing that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm sorry, Councilmember Shaw.
It's not for Jennifer.
No, okay. All right, we'll open it for public hearing and also invite Dr. Park to, you're the applicant, so it's all yours.
Yes. Thank you, council members. Thank you, city administrators and mayor for considering this street name change and for allowing me the opportunity to speak to this resolution. My name is David Park. I'm the vice president and the founding dean for Rocky Vista University, Montana College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I'm also the requester. I can understand that as from a city's point of view, there's two major concerns in all things that you would deliberate, and that will be cost and public safety. So I'd just like to briefly address those two things. And regarding this name change, I do have a video that does clearly show that when you go west on Monad, it ends right at stock development and it curves down south. So let me address the cost. As some of you may be aware, this street is still under development, and the payment for the street is being covered by us and by stock development. We have a large medical school campus that will be here for hopefully hundreds of years. And Mike Stock, as you may know, is developing 720 apartment units right on that section. And he is in partner with us and in very support of it, as we foresee a lot of our medical students and future employees from out of state living in these apartments. So when it comes to costs, we're paying for this, and we are already willing to pay and expecting to pay for all costs due to any signages and street signs associated with this. I understand that there may be some nominal cost to perhaps map changes and other things, and I will say here that I am willing as a constituent to donate money to cover those nominal costs as well. Currently, this is being called by many people as the new medical school in development in the West End. And I can foresee that in the very near future, when we're in full operations, that will just be considered the medical school. And I think many people in the community, especially the first responders, will know exactly where Rocky Vista University and the campus will be. Addressing safety, first let me say that as a health sciences university and a medical school, human safety and well-being is integral to us. It is who we are, it is what we teach, it is what we do. So we understand this. As we grow in our reputation, I believe that all the first responders will know Rocky Vista, and perhaps the name association will actually be more helpful in identifying the location should there be a response that's being made. One further thing is that I will announce publicly here that it is my intention and plan to partner with the Billings first responders in the future to perform hyper-realistic simulation training in mass casualties. That would include active shooter events, multi-vehicle and other emergency medicine response on our campus, utilizing our state-of-the-art healthcare simulation facility. So with that, and just one other thing, that from our campus, we think the name Rocky Vista Way is appropriate, because from our campus, we literally have a beautiful view of the Rim Rocks, a beautiful Rocky Vista view. I would just, and as I finish up my comments, I would just like to acknowledge the city in being very supportive of this project, and I hope the council will continue to support us with approval tonight. Our goal is to be the premier medical school in Montana, and we are very proud to be right here in Billings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Doctor, you just remind us how much what's the building cost, and what kind of economic impact you expect to have, and I guess related to that is taxes, and to what extent you guys do or don't pay taxes.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that question. We are a private proprietary entity, and we are not a not-profit, so we will not collect donations, we will not ask for money. As a matter of fact, as a regular business, we will contribute to the tax base, and from our feasibility study, we estimate over $3.3 million in tax revenue, both local and to the state. As for economic impact, we're expecting $78 million in economic impact to the city, with lots of new jobs, increased housing, and lots of more spending. We will have over 800 medical students in full operations and employees in that facility, with large parking structure and with additional plans for growth. So we feel that in this hub of medical healthcare delivery of excellence for the tri-state region, that we are a major component in elevating the status of healthcare education, research, and delivery.
Thank you. Any further questions for Councilor Park or staff? Councilmember Denise?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Monad Road's been around for a long time and extending. Is there a reason why you didn't want to use Monad Road and you wanted to use this other road name?
Well, thank you for that question. The reason why we want to do that is really honestly for us to have a really great address. We're going to be attracting people from all over the country. Every year, thousands of medical students will apply. We want to attract them to our area. And when they come to Billings, we want them to know that this is a place that's supported by the city. And I think it's a very simple address for people to recognize. That is the major reason for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Councilmember Purington?
Thank you, Dr. Parks. I have a question for Jennifer. So according to your map that you have before this one, where you're showing that the blue, no, it is that one. I have a better one on my computer, but anyway, it shows that the Rocky Vista would be off of the straight line of what Monad would originally be, going into that. I suppose that is a roundabout there at the end. It doesn't show it on that map. I'm looking at the map that was,
Are you
No,
talking?
I'm not talking shallow. I'm talking about that's the drain ditch. Okay, so there's a drain ditch there. So I guess what I'm asking is because with the way the development is being going on in that west end right there, that I think it won't take too long for something to be developed just west of there. So according to this map and a little bit of that one too, it shows that it drops down a little bit. I don't have a problem with naming it Rocky Vista. My concern is moving west and where you pick up the Monad Road again, or if it's going to be a continuation of another name. I don't think that it would be good to name it beyond there, Rocky Vista. I think that is part of that campus name, and which I think is great. But I'm just thinking moving west.
Councilmember Purington, so this is actually the city's functional classification map. So that undetermined section there, kind of in the middle, that's what's in the map right now. So it won't necessarily completely align with Monad, but something in that area, and is undetermined at this point as to what it would name. So we are expecting, obviously, growth past there, but we don't anticipate that we would need to pick up Monad at that point, where it would go from Monad to Rocky Vista and continue straight on. That's not the plan at the current moment.
Okay, just to clarify, we need to see if there's any other public comment during the public hearing. Is there any other public comment during this public hearing? If so, please come forward. Nobody's coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing on item number 6. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution for a street name change from Monad Road to Rocky Vista Way as recommended by staff.
Councilmember Ripsis puts up a peace signal. Okay, discussion on the motion. Councilmember Joy Anise.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will support this motion because the origin of Monad is in Ward 3, right when you get to the railroad track. So you can go this way to Monad or that way. It isn't a street that has I would say a character that anybody would really identify, except that as you get on Monad, it sharply turns. And basically that's it. If you're stuck at the railroad tracks, that's Monad. And so I don't think it has a character that has a long history that really would and somehow be diminished by having it not have the name all the way through. As development happens, continues on, maybe Georgina will be the name we'll go with. Who knows? I just don't think that Monad as a street has anything particularly that would be a negative if it had a piece of it that was not called Monad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, there's other instances where names, roads change the name. I talked to Debbie Melling about this. Laurel turns into Montana, 5th Street into Virginia. Yellowstone River Road goes to Hilltop, and then Governor's turns into Yellowstone River Road. 32nd Street turns into Zimmerman Way, then to Skyway, and then into Wick. So, I mean, there's multiple situations within the city that has it. But my concern was, is this a safety concern as far as 911 emergencies? And she stated no. I mean, back in the day they may have, but not now. It's all computerized. If there's an issue, there's an emergency, it'll go into the system, and they'll be able to find exactly where the address is once the maps get updated with the addressing. So I'll support the motion. I'm hoping it's not a precedent moving forward, but I agree there's some finality to that road right there, and it's not a big deal either way. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, you're prepared to vote? Yes. Okay, the motion is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Go forth and build. That's item number 6. Item number 7. Tony, would you read item number 7 and however you want to do it? I guess our first item up will be item 7A. So if you want to combine 7 and 7A, I guess.
Item number 7, public hearing and resolution for annexation 22-04, a parcel located west of Harnish Boulevard and north of Trade Center Avenue. Staff recommends a conditional approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation. Item A, annexation agreement with Messinger Company LLC. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you. Monica Plucker, Planning Division Manager, is our presenters this evening. Monica,
Yeah, good night.
sorry to keep you here so long.
No worries. Okay, this should go, I think, fairly quickly and fairly smoothly. This is property that, quite honestly, you're already familiar with. In 2021, you considered an annexation along with several other decisions to support bringing this property into the city to basically support a Coca-Cola bottling facility. Tonight, the things that we need to take care of are three things. One, a decision on the annexation petition. This, unlike some of the ones that we see pretty frequently, does not have a zone change associated with it because it's already zoned light industrial, a zone that's recognized by both the city and the county. So no joint hearing, no zone change. There's also an annexation agreement to consider. It's very identical to an annexation agreement that's already in existence. There is no presentation for that. If you have questions on it, I'll do my best to field them. And then lastly, there is also an associated ward ordinance boundary. No presentation for that, but just so you know, this is Ward 5. All right, so this is the annexation exhibit that is attached to the resolution for your consideration. The property that was annexed earlier was this area here in 2021, and this is the area that would come in. I want to draw just a little bit of attention here. It was never the intent that that right-of-way wouldn't come in. We actually had a little bit of a discrepancy between the exhibit of the original petition in 2021 and the legal description that was included with the exhibit. That right-of-way was shown but omitted in the actual written description. So we're taking this opportunity to clean that up and get that right-of-way in. We're treating it already as if it is in the right-of-way. But in case you're wondering why that's there or why it's shown, that's specifically why. As you can see, the green, sorry, I don't know how the star got moved over, but we'll call that a formatting issue. But it's very clearly depicted that the green hashed area is what we're considering. It's just my understanding that from a space and logistical aspect that this space is needed for their facility, for their bottling facility, which, as if you've driven by lately, you know that there's excavation and dirt work going on. So exciting to see that progressing forward. This is just a map showing the zoning so that you can see that it is light industrial in the vicinity. Just another aerial photo and a few pictures, recent pictures for you. So the excavation that I was referring to, we'll just move through these fairly quickly. All of these are looking from Harnish Boulevard. All right, so this property is not unique from the property that's already been considered. So several of the same existing conditions you should be familiar with. It is in the limits of annexation. Any development will be in accordance with the light industrial zone. There is an annexation agreement to identify the public improvements and requirements that does have a waiver of right to protest included with it. And there's no reason to believe that we're not able to serve this property in the same capacity that we've already said that we can serve those other 4 parcels in the Shackelford subdivision. So for those reasons, staff is recommending conditional approval. We ask that you hold a public hearing. Once you have the hearing, the recommendation is that you consider conditional approval. The conditional approval is that within 45 working days that the annexation agreement be completed and filed. If you chose not to, we wouldn't consider the annexation or the ward ordinance boundaries. So I'm going to wrap that up and yeah, just leave you with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Monica. I'm sure we will have some questions. Just going forward in the future, intellectually, it's hard for me to wrap my head around having something before an A. So it seems to me that the annexation should be 7A, and then this annexation agreement 7B. But there actually is something here, Council, for us to approve before we get to 7A. So, and that is, of course, the annexation. So let's, you look quizzical.
I am, only because I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I'm asking you to hold the hearing on the annexation petition.
Right, and what I'm saying is just for future when we set these up, because I know this has been the pattern, it just seems to me that the annexation ought to be 7A.
Noted.
Yep, because A's first. So, we will move on. Any other important questions for Monica on the annexation before we go to public hearing? We do have to have the public hearing. I don't see any. So is there anybody who would like to comment on the annexation? Our applicant.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your service. My name is Joe Easton. I'm Director of Property Development. I was here in July and October with the previous request. We support the annexation petition and the conditions attached to it, and thank Monica and the rest of the public staff for their support and your support for this project. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. We are under construction, and so we're off and running. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment on item 7? Seeing none, public hearing is closed then. Council, any other questions for staff, motions, otherwise? Councilmember Purington?
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to conditionally approve annexation 22-04 as recommended by staff.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyette. Motion is for approval. Discussion on the motion? Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll proceed to the vote. If in favor of the motion for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation, item 7, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item then up is item 7A, the annexation agreement. Monica, any further presentation on the annexation agreement? I believe not. Okay. Any questions about that or motions? Council, and there is no public hearing here. Councilmember Boyette.
I move to approve annexation agreement with Messinger Company LLC as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Purington. Motion is for approval. Discussion. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question about the trails. Do you have that map up that you can, is the trails, maybe it's just simple, is it only going to be along the frontage road? Is that where the trail is going to be? There's a ditch there. Is that going to go on, which side of the ditch is it going to go on then? Have they already put a trail in the other section? Then this would just be a small extension, is that correct?
So, Councilmember Neese, my understanding, and I can certainly try to clarify and send you any more detail in an email, but with their previous annexation along the frontage road, there is the 10-foot wide trail that is required along the frontage. Okay. As far as this parcel, there would be a sidewalk requirement along Harnish Boulevard, but there's not a trail requirement related to this specific parcel that's in question with the annexation. But as far as your question about the ditch or any other logistics of that 10-foot wide trail, I'd be happy to follow up with you on an email on that.
Okay. So is that, so that must be Harnish Road there, so that they're actually not.
Yes, this is Harnish here.
So that we're just getting the right of way there. We're not actually having a trail across there. Okay. Okay.
Correct. So this is the land area that was previously annexed in their initial request, which does hit frontage, and does also front Harnish as well. And so this is just an extension of that sidewalk requirement on Harnish. Okay, thank you.
You know, Monica, while we're talking about trails, that this property is generally in the vicinity of the connection for the Marathon Loop. between Zoo Drive and Josephine Crossing and all that areas. Do you know exactly what the plan is, where the plan is for the Marathon Loop connection?
I don't, but I'll let Wyatt, it looks like he's.
The nice part about this is it's flat, should be fairly easy to get right of way, and for construction doesn't have the topographical challenges of a lot of the other areas of town.
So, Mayor and Council and Mayor, so we can, kind of to Monica's point, we can share more information on this, but we did the study, the trail study from Zoo Drive to Riverfront Park through this whole area of where a trail could be aligned. And a lot of this area, actually, there's different routes that are options. There's a lot of wide right-of-way through here on these county roads, 80 feet in many cases. And so a lot of the options identify potentially a separated side path, like what will be constructed along the frontage road here, but further south that comes across and connects over to Riverfront Park. So we could share that again and just kind of remind everybody of those different options, but that's what's being looked at as it sort of gets through this area, whether it's separated along roads or off street.
Okay, so the route has not been determined at this point.
Not exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Motion, we have a motion for approval of the annexation agreement, item 7A. Any further discussion on that motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion for approval, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next, our boundary ordinance, item 7B. We kind of know this routine. Monica, you going to put up another map for us, or? Okay. This will be additions to Ward 4, no presentation. Or I'm sorry, Ward 5. Yeah, I'm sorry. And we do need to have a public hearing. We'll open it up for public hearing. Is there any public comment on item 7B, the addition of this property to Ward 5? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Back to council. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the first reading ordinance expanding the boundaries of Ward 5 as recommended by staff.
Councilmember Ripsis has the second, whether he wants it or not, since it will affect his pay, I'm sure. So. Okay, any discussion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion for approval, item 7B, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item 7 and brings us to item 8. Tony, would you read item 8?
Item 8, public hearing and second final reading ordinance for zone change 1013, a zone change located at 527 Lake Elmo Drive. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria. Action, approval, or disapproval of Zoning Commission recommendation.
Monica.
So like how Jennifer had the first half kind of the regular, I've got the back.
Yeah.
I'm the closer. So zone change 1013, also a project that you should be familiar with to an extent. You had your first reading, which you unanimously approved the zone change with no questions or discussion. So I'll just briefly remind you of the property. It's an into property off of Lake Elmo that is surrounded by a CX. It's one of the last remaining kind of residential type properties in a commercial area. The intent is that they would repurpose the structure for medical office space. And any just to remember that any sort of improvements that they make, they will be subject to the proportional compliance parts of our zoning code. The findings that help support the decision are included on this slide. And just want to leave you with a photo of the property, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Before we go to public hearing, any questions for Monica? Don't see any, so we'll open it for public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on this item? There's no one online, I'm assuming. Nobody is present here, so we'll close our public hearing on item 8. Councilmember Neese?
Let's see, having conducted 2 public hearings, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the second reading for zone change 1014 and adopt the findings of the 1013, excuse me, I'm on the wrong one, 1013, and adopt the findings of 10 criteria as approved by City Council on first reading May 23rd of 2022. I just want to get out of here.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. Okay, is there a second? Councilmember Owen. Is there any discussion? If not, the motion is for approval. Item 8, second reading. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item number 8. Tony, would you read item number 9?
Item number 9, public hearing and second final reading ordinance for zone change 1014, a zone change located at 3038 Central Avenue. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria. Action, approval, or disapproval of Zoning Commission recommendation.
Monica.
All right. This property is located along Central Avenue. They are proposing to go from CMU 1 to NX3. Just as a reminder, the NX3 district is solely a residential district that is used for our most intensive multifamily developments. There is some NX3 already in the neighborhood. Also, it's an extension of an already developed apartment complex. There were a few questions that came up last time that I did just want to take a minute to address. And actually, Councilmember Neese, I believe it was during this hearing that you specifically asked about the Zoom pre-application or neighborhood meetings and just specifically what's going on with that, I guess is a way to say it. And so just want to let you know that, I mean, the code does not allow for solely a Zoom meeting. It has continued just out of practice. It's not something that has to continue. We have not directly heard feedback that it hasn't been accomplishing the goal. So I think that's also why we haven't pushed to say it's no longer appropriate. But to be very specific and direct to what the code states that it does need to be held in a geographic area. So I think, taking your feedback to heart that it just, if they want to offer Zoom in addition to, there's nothing that we changed or anything. It's just, it's held over, it's carry over really from the changing practices in COVID. So just wanted to take a second to acknowledge that. So, otherwise, there was some discussion with the developer, but I don't believe there are outstanding questions. And so these are, some findings, that support your first reading action. So with that, I will conclude my presentation.
Okay, any questions for Monica on item number 9? If not, it does need to be a public hearing, so we'll open up public hearing. Item number 9, this is the extension of the Hunters Point project on Central. There's nobody present with us in person, nobody online, so I'll close the public hearing. Back to council. I saw, did you have your hand up?
No.
No, okay.
I can't.
No, that's okay, that's okay. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw.
Having conducted 2 public hearings, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the second reading of zone change 1014 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as approved by City Council on first reading May 23rd, 2022.
Very good. Second by Councilmember Shaw. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Rupsis.
Just real quick, Monica, since you brought it up about the Zoom, I've got no problem with the Zoom meetings, but what I do find very challenging is when they send out letters, and I've seen this even some from the city when we send out notifications of Zoom meetings, and it's got a super long string that you have to type into the URL, and it's not emailed, so you can't even just copy and paste it. So it would be nice if people learned how to use like a URL shortener or something like that. But that's just a little bit of feedback. It's obviously, but I don't have a problem with continuing the Zoom meetings. I think we just need to make it a little easier for people to connect.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for getting back to us on Monica on that. We appreciate that. I appreciate that you got back and gave us the update on that. So that's great. And then I agree with Councilmember Rupsis, but he's also a techie software guy, so if someone needs help in shortening that URL, call him.
Yeah.
Is Tiny URL still a website? Okay, great. We can start adding it to our informational flyers.
Any further discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval. We'll proceed to a vote on item number 9. If in favor of approval, item number 9, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us to our final regular agenda item, number 10. Tony, would you read item number 10?
Item number 10, public hearing and second final reading ordinance for zone change 1015, a zone change located at 1411 Emma Drive. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria. Action, approval or disapproval of Zoning Commission recommendation.
All right, so I want to take a second to acknowledge that this is our last second reading public hearing for zone changes. As you know, you made an amendment to the zoning code that these no longer require hearings. You'll still have a second reading, of course, but just won't have to have the public hearing component. So this is the last one. Also just want to say Penny, who spoke earlier in the original public comment, she just left. She actually does have a displaced individual or individuals that are taking her up on her first offer. So she left to go let them in. So it's not a reflection that she, right, exactly.
And she's the wimp.
We appreciate that of her, and that she could offer that, and hopefully we'll continue the good work in her absence. So just very quickly, I think most of you are very familiar with this property because we've also had similar zone change applications, but this is a property that is currently zoned N2 that is being requested to go to N3. It does, in the transition, give up the ability to build a second primary unit on the parcel, so it will be a single family only parcel. There are many in the area, N2 or N3, either one is compatible for the area. So this is the property, and we do believe that you have support for your findings, and also keeping in line with the action from the previous zone change. No reason to believe that, you'd want to change action from first reading to second reading. So with that, I'll keep it simple and
Thank you. Before I open up for our last public hearing, any questions for Monica on this one? Councilmember Purington?
So Monica, in this subdivision, is this the last one from the N2 to the N3s? Because it already has a structure on it, and I know that they wanted to change that zoning.
It does already have a structure on it. So these other properties presently that are zoned into also already have existing duplexes on them. So I'm not aware of another undeveloped lot in this area that would want to go from N2 to N3. I mean, I think this is it for this neighborhood. I think as far as just the development pressure and the product of the developer of this particular subdivision, I do not see or anticipate anything similar to what we just went through.
I'm talking about also with an existing structure, single-family home that is still zoned into in that subdivision. They all been pretty well cleaned up?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open for public hearing on item number 10. Is there anybody who'd like to comment? No. We'll close our public hearing on item number 10. Councilmember Owen.
Having conducted 2 public hearings, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the second reading for zone change 1015 and adopt the finding of the 10 criteria as approved by City Council on first reading May 23rd, 2022.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Neese. Any discussion? Not. Motion is for approval. If in favor of the motion, item number 10, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes our regular agenda. Item number 11 having previously been removed. Brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anybody who would like to comment on a non-agenda item? There's nobody present with us tonight and nobody online, so we have nothing there. Any council initiatives?
But I have a question on 11.
Okay.
Because I know that there's been a lot of back and forth, and conversations, and supposedly, because it's a land issue, we're not supposed to, I guess, talk with the Boyers about this. But I'm just interested in knowing what's going on.
Sure. So Debbie and I, actually, it wasn't just Debbie, our staff has met. We met with the Boyers about 10 days ago on Friday, and then this past Friday. And the discussion, candidly, was that we really didn't see as a staff a recommendation for the land exchange. Didn't seem to be any ultimately positives, including really understanding what the positive were to the Boyers. That then, in part, led to a more extensive conversation about what's going to happen with the property ultimately with development. Because now we have water and sewer that are running down the right-of-way right in front of these properties. So whoever the buyers were of their lots or the subdivision, we're at some point going to hear from the health department that you're within 500 feet of a water line, you need to connect to utilities. So frankly, this gave us an opportunity to fully back up and say, what should the development of this property look like? That'll be up to the Boyers, but they were open to working with planning staff and public works staff to see how that would look. And the last seed I'll plant with you guys is, and this, Debbie and I think is not going to be incredibly unique to this, but it's not typical. We have 7 figures into the utility line past their property. By the letter of our rules, their footage across the other side of the road would have them paying half of that money back. Well, it's never going to make sense economically to pay half of that money back with a handful of homes being built there. So we're going to have to find, or we don't have to, we're trying to find a more equitable way to deal with that. And we think this might have be something that may need to be replicated around the inner belt loop, as there's a lot of topography issues related to development. And so anyways, that's where the conversation is. The Boyers, it'll be ultimately up to them if they do want to move forward with a city conversation about annexation, reconsidering annexation and development to connect to utilities, or whether ultimately they move forward with a project in the county, of which, if homes get built there, then we would have that discussion again at that time relative to utilities.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.